Getting started here. We're going to start first with the we asked Rams technology in the back to give us instructions on how to use because we are broadcast production of this and so we do ask that those that are speaking to use the microphone. So yeah, we have two microphone system. You see on the little collar here, it's green. Green means that it's live and everyone can hear it. Red is muted. The button underneath, and because when you're talking with the tomorrow during the actual commission meeting, all the commissioners have their own microphone in front of them. But we have a lot of people speaking today. We just have one per table. So just make sure to speak into the microphones on the other side of the room. So I want to start with, first of all, introducing somebody who probably needs no introductions, but has been appointed by the governor, and we're still waiting for Senate confirmation. That probably won't be. We think it'll be. That's a possibility. But Brad D. will serve as the new at-large commissioner, replacing Don Long. So I'm really happy Brad was willing to step into this assignment. And as we're going to go do introductions. I have an org chart put up on the screen. I also gave you a little pictures here, completely up to date. But this is a workshop, so this is a place to ask questions and have conversation back and forth around the table. If we're going to engage with folks, who are not at the table, we're going to ask that they come to the table. We'll make sure they have a microphone so we can do that. So we'll try to use the org chart on the tape on the screen here for the UDOT folks. But I'm going to start with our chairman, Nabi Sadati. Anything else you want to say?
Maggie, I'm from Sunny St. Georgia, roughly 60 degree temperature today and tomorrow, then after that, you're home. And also, one more thing about that,
getting confirmation except one item. As of
yesterday, have outstanding ticket in Washington County Sheriff's Department is and trust and home number for non-accidents Corvettes.
Yes.
So you need to take care of that before you go before Senate.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you, Chairman. I was just saying that I don't remember the citation, but I do remember the quote. And yes, it's a beautiful car and I'm very crash. But just happy to be here. Carlos and I go back a long way, as I do with many of you, for that matter. I just told Carlos that my feeling is Governor Levitt made the best decision of his term. I selected this here. With us in the legislature, as long as I'm behind it. Ever since 16, majority leader, and then had the received college, so I retired. Away we went. Back for a few years. And I'm more than pleased to serve on this transportation commission. Understand that I'm not through, but I'm excited about it. As the governor and I had a conversation, and he asked me to help in this administration. This was my top priority. I'm happy to be here.
Luke Kramer, Commissioner Loggington, has been a big fan of Brad's for many years. I have heard that Corvettes is great.
So it's widely dispersed, no question about it. But we've had the opportunity to work together on some issues involving Tuacahn and other things, and they're just delighted to be part of this. I was at that meeting with Governor Levitt that Natalie hosted the other day, and after that, Carlos, maybe run for vice president? I don't know, something along those lines. It seemed the accolades kept coming, so thank you so much, and it's an honor to be here. I live in downtown Salt Lake and Commissioner at Large for the state.
Okay,
Come on, Lou, think big. He needs to be president.
before we go to Rob, just to help Brad get kind of the picture of the organization, we have two deputy directors that report to me. You can kind of see along the top line here of this work chart. And the one that is sick today is Lisa Wilson. She's deputy director for engineering and operations. So I say that in front of Rob's introduction here because Rob reports to Lisa. But Rob?
My name's Rob Clayton. I'm the Region 3 Director, so down in Utah County. Yeah, so we're just south of the Salt Lake area on a horizontal band across the state, so.
Busy group.
Utah County all the way out to the basin with Kevin there, so expand. Jim Evans, Transportation Commission, welcome. Region 3, live down in Orem. Excited to have you here and excited to be work with this group. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone, and hi, Brad. Natalie Gochner. I work at the University of Utah. I represent Region 2, which is Tooele, Salt Lake, and Summit counties. I don't know how long I've been on the commission, but it seems like I'm hitting like 3 years or something like that, but love the experience, such an important group, and the biggest lesson I've learned since being here is just how sophisticated and innovative and forward-looking UDOT is, and that's been really fun for me to be a part of and to see. I've admired your work for a long time, so I didn't know that this is who we were getting. I'm so happy to see you today.
And I'm Robert Stewart. I'm the Region 2 Director. Summit's.
It's my guy.
I had to wear this for Natalie. Yeah.
Yeah, he says that. Nice. I like the bears, too.
I'm Troy Peterson, Operations Director at UDOT. Hold on, there we go. So this morning we had an unfortunate crash this morning on I-15 southbound. We had a wrong way driver. One thing we do know is the driver of the wrong way vehicle ended up going fatal. Don't know the exact location where the person got on, but the crash occurred between 600 North and the I-80, I-15 junction there. And the driver hit a busload of what they initially reported was some military, and some other information I found out today. It's ROTC students from the USU were actually on that bus. And that's about all we know right now. So it's unfortunate, and I know traffic's a little bit crazy out there right now, but.
Yeah, and the commission has funded what? How many different?
So about a year ago, the commission funded a project to install wrong way driver detection location and we've got 23 locations. Those are installed and operating in this area. Unfortunately, I mean, obviously, we've got a lot more interchanges than 23, so that's not our full system, but we do have, we are getting information back on those locations. You know, we get a lot of people who are getting on wrong and making correcting their path. So they're self-correcting. So the system's doing what it was designed to do, and it's been very helpful. But in this situation, obviously, the person we're on was not in a location where we have an interchange that's outfitted with that technology. Anything else?
Troy, what do you have reporting to you? Your operations director. What divisions report to you?
Oh, operations. Okay. So I have aeronautics, our traffic and safety group, our traffic management division, which has everything from weather, our incident management team, our traffic and signal group, freeway operations, so anything with the express lanes. And then I'm missing, we created a group last year, our rail division. That's another component of the operations side of things, as well as our equipment. And then I saved this the best for last, our motor carrier group. So all of our port of entries. And so quite a big group, but it's a lot of fun.
Good morning, everyone. Carmen Swanwick. I'm the Project Development Director. And within my group is central construction, materials and pavements, structures, right-of-way, and pre-construction activities. Thank you.
Morning, Nathan Lee. I'm the Director of Technology and Innovation. My group's up there on the table there. I have analytics and governance. I have maintenance and facilities, research, our strategic technologies division, the transportation performance division, and the coordinate with the Department of Technology Services.
Good morning. I'm Josh Vanjura, and I'm the director of our Trails and Transit Group, which the Trails Division is responsible for implementation of the Utah Trail Network, which was a new program introduced last year, along with our Transit Division, which is responsible for capital improvements, basically everything up through ribbon cutting for fixed guideway projects along the Wasatch Front.
Leif Felder, Director of Legislative Affairs and Policy. My small group, Peter Aspelin and I, you may recognize that name as well, Brad. He worked for the legislature and was fortunate enough to get him to come and work here as well. But we tackle anything during the legislature and interact with the committee chairs and so forth. And then we also work with all of these folks around the table with the policies, the internal policies that affect the agency. We work on the administrative rules, and then we head up the interactions with our congressional delegation. And just for your benefit, just to give these folks the stamp of approval they deserve, this is a well-staffed commission. You have been a part of many committees and in your time, and this is an amazing group of folks. And just use them, ask questions, they'll have answers. Most of these folks have really smart people that work for them, and so they'll go back and talk to them. They always tell me that, but anyway.
I'm sitting at the big kids table. Good morning, my name is Ivan Hartle. I'm the Director of Financial Programming for the department. I get to stand in front of the commission and talk to you a lot, so.
Tiffany Pocock, I'm the Director of Program Development. Ivan is part of my group, as well as the planning, long-range planning efforts that happen for the state, as well as our environmental studies.
Ben Hewitt, Deputy Director of Planning and Investment. So I get to work with great people like Nate, Lori, Tiffany, Josh, a few others. Eileen Barron helps us with some communications and public involvement, and then there's Rod McDaniels in risk as well. So.
I'm Heather Barthold. I'm the Commission Assistant.
And Heather will be very helpful for you, Commissioner D. I'm Rhonda Menlove and represent Region 1, the northern part of the state, and look forward to working with Commissioner D again and doing some good things for the state of Utah. Thank you.
Rob White, Region 1 Director. That's Davis, Weber, Box Elder, Cache, and Rich County, Morgan counties up in north of Utah. So work a lot with Rhonda here.
I'm Shara Hillier, the Finance Director.
Commissioner Kevin Van Tassel. I've noticed that if you're close, you get a lot of volume. If you're too far away, not too much. So for whatever that's worth. But anyway, I live in Vernal, Utah. I'm a commissioner at large. great to be a part of this group and the great things that we're doing here in the state of Utah. I don't know if you saw that yesterday in the Fox News. They reported that nationwide we're in the top 5 of road quality, and we didn't get there by accident. And so UDOT, thank you for all you do and keeping our roads safe. And I was talking to Carlos a little earlier. We love the legislature. It was a great place to serve, but I think as the only thing I worry, they continue to dump on us, and we can't continue to hold staff as tight as we are, not overload and burn people up. So we're going to have to see if we can't, as they give us more challenges, which we'll accept, we need to make sure we get some funding to go with it to take care of staff. That's my soapbox for today.
Kurt Thornock. I'm the Region 4 Director. I cover the 14 southernmost counties in our state, as I like to call it, God's backyard.
And so commissioners, as you know, there's lots of folks that we have in the room. We're not going to go around and introduce everyone, but we have deputies, division directors that are here. And so our goal is that any questions you have, probe hard, ask questions. We can, if we can't justify it and pass the red face test, then shame on us. But there is one person, one partner I would like to introduce himself. Ivan.
I'm Ivan Marrero. I'm the division administrator for the Federal Highway. Can you hear me? No? Okay. Ivan Marrero, Federal Highway Administration. Close to my mouth there. Sorry about that. I'm with the Federal Highway Administration here in Utah, so we have the pleasure of working with all the transportation providers in the state, help them deliver the federal aid program. I consider myself a critical part of the commission agenda. Notice I say I consider myself, but so you'll hear me from time to time talking about some of the federal areas of interest to the state. And Brigitte Mandel is my assistant, so she's also here. So, nice to meet you.
Yeah, these are, you know, when the feds say we're from the federal government, we're here to help, Ivan and Brigitte really mean it, and they're great partners. So we appreciate everything they do for us. So before we jump into the agenda, I just want to see if any of the commissioners have any questions on anything right now before we get going. Again, this is a casual conversation that we're going to have so that you are prepared to make some decisions. Oh, yes, sorry.
Just want to say congratulations to Commissioner Menlove for the 29th birthday yesterday.
So, Ben, are you starting us off, or are we going to Tiffany?
Good afternoon, or I guess it's still morning. It feels maybe like afternoon. Carlos said that he wanted to have fun today, so that is my job, to make sure that we move swiftly and efficiently through this agenda while having fun. Today, I'm going to go over some of the process, and then we'll lean into all of my teammates to go over a legislative update that we just finished, talk about the existing money that we have that we are excited to program, and then go over some of the capacity programs that we have recommendations for you. Oops, wrong. So, the goal of this effort, there's a series of 3 meetings that are going to happen. Today, we are going to be talking about the funding levels that we have and the programs that we would like to recommend funding levels for. Because we have assets, we're continuing to add assets, and we would like to keep them in good condition. And so we have recommendations for you all on how to best maintain our bridges and roadways and signals. We do so with the commission. Again, we come with recommendations. We'll then, in the next series of meetings, ask for some approvals, and then we'll come with some projects that meet those funding recommendations, as well as some of our capacity programs. We'll have some recommendations both today and in the May workshop. We do this all in an effort to get, working with our federal partners at FHWA and FTA to get an approved STIP so that we can go and, as I mentioned, protect our assets as well as add capacity to our growing state. This is kind of an outline of kind of the year we get to look forward to. Right now we are in the March meeting where we, again, will have some program level recommendations for you, and we'll go over what those assets look like and why we have those recommendations to put forward. And then in the May workshop, we will be seeking approvals for those funding levels as well as coming with additional project levels to address corridors that need some attention. And as I mentioned, all with the goal in the August timeframe to be working towards an approved STIP. Any questions on the process or why we're here today having a bunch of fun? Okay. Lisa is sick today, but she loves the check marks, so I wanted to point out like we're checking our way through the workshop, and Leif's going to help me with the, oops, can you go back a slide? I skipped a slide for you, there you go.
All right, moving in to the legislative update, and I have Peter Asplin, my partner in, well, it's not really crime, but sometimes it feels like it. So this is just quick overview. I'm not going to go through this in detail. This kind of the cycle of the legislative process, starting in May, go through an interim study process. We start some governor's budget stuff in July, and that goes through December, and then of course, we begin to advocate for that as a department in support of the governor. Legislative session, 45 days of just fast and furious figuring things out. This year it was January 16th to March 1st. A few stats from that, 934 total bills. So Brad, you need to get back there and push that down a little bit, but we reviewed 739 of those bills, and then there were an additional 662 substitute bills that we reviewed. 591 of those 934 passed. We were all really hoping they'd get to 600, but they just didn't quite make it. 242 fiscal notes that we produced from just the Department of Transportation here. And of course, I need to, anytime I say fiscal notes, need to give a lot of credit to Shara and her group, Ryan Huntsman. Really appreciate their work there. And then implementation, I say March through June with a ... because that can go on for a very long time as far as implementation goes. But we communicate that and get the information to these folks around the table who push those policies out there to folks and get things implemented as intended by the legislature. And we're grateful for the opportunity to do that. So going to move into the bills. We're going to go through 4 or so bills specifically, and then I'll just give you a few additional highlights on one final slide there, and Peter will help me with this as well. So HB 488, this was, I'd say, a pretty significant transportation funding bill. It was started off small and kind of grew as it went through the process. The biggest thing, that first bullet point there, it shifts some ongoing funding from the Transportation Investment Fund to the Transit Transportation Investment Fund. And so it's about $45 to $50 million ongoing because it's if you want the real details, it's 1% of the revenues that come in from our state sales tax, $45 to $50 million, and that'll grow over time for the TTIF and provide some additional state funding for the transit area. And of course, this committee helps with that, or this commission helps with the prioritization of those projects from that fund. So It also allocates a portion of a Salt Lake County local option sales tax. It's the fifth, if some of you guys are aware of that, for express bus services on 5600 West. Salt Lake County has not yet imposed that, so we'll see what happens with that. But that could be some money for that. I'm sure most of you have heard about that, the importance of that project. Modifies funding for the Cottonwood Canyon TIF. So currently the TIF or CC-TIF funding maxes out at $20 million, and that's being changed to a 0.44%, and so that'll grow over time. 0.44 is just a shade under 20 million, and then that'll grow beyond that now. Yeah.
I think I can figure this out, but essentially it provides more money over time to the canyon transportation issue.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. That's exactly right.
I can figure that out. I just wanted to hear him say it.
That is exactly right. So let me just say that on the Cottonwood Canyon TIF, that is one of our capital investment funds that the commission does not have a prioritization process for. This. It's exclusively legislative directed. And last year was kind of the first big tranche of money, $150 million for kind of phase one of the Cottonwood for public safety services. And the reason I bring that up, just I want the commission to be aware that typically these local option sales taxes have been used for transportation purposes. And so this is a little bit of a change here for some public safety services, and so we'll see what happens there, or how much of that money is allocated. It is determined by the local government, and so we'll see what they do with that. So then, this is really cool. Here, a new state infrastructure bank. It's limited. Is created by this bill. Somewhat similar to our current state infrastructure bank, but this one is only for Salt Lake County, and it's funded by Salt Lake County revenues, so that makes sense. And when I say Salt Lake County, that includes the cities within Salt Lake County. It's as I said, administered very similar to the state infrastructure bank that we currently have, which involves the commission who approves loans from that bank, okay, and UDOT has our part in helping to administer that as well. Again, funded by local option sales taxes, which are not implemented yet, so it won't be funded until or unless the county decides to implement that fifth. Funding is loaned once, so this is kind of interesting. It's loaned once, and then proceeds from the first loans are then used to fund some specified projects in Sandy, Bluffdale, and then UDOT gets a chunk of that money. I think it's to help enhance some things in the canyons. It's really, I think, Cottonwood Heights, but it was kind of decided it'd probably be best if the money went to UDOT. So we'll see what happens with that. The payback on that is 20 years. So, you know, in 20, 25 years, we can come back and repeal that if we're all still around. So stay tuned for that. Okay, I'm going to pass this over to Peter.
Great. Again, I'm Peter Asplund, also with Policy and Legislative Affairs for UDOT. This bill, HB 430, Local Government Transportation Services Amendments, had a very interesting path during the session. Representative Perucci correctly points out that there's not one bus stop in Harriman. And so she introduced a bill that said, we're going to have to report the sales tax for every town in Utah, and then UTA will have to spend that money for transit in each individual town. And that obviously would be an impossible thing to administer. but it definitely got the conversation started with all the right people. And so what this has ended up being now is that it's creating a public transit innovation grant program. It's has kind of three sources of potential money for these innovation grants. Two are local option sales taxes, and one is straight from TTIF. And as they looked around at all the meetings we went to and talked about whether the county should administer this program, everybody voted except for UDOT to administer all of these grants. So the sales tax money can't potentially start rolling until July 1, 2025, but the bill is effective this July 1st. And it means that UDOT then will set up a prioritization process using the commission here to prioritize these funding projects for these innovation grants. Our sense is what they would be used for is to create kind of, I don't know, micro transit or transit services in maybe individual towns or areas, and that after a couple of years, the reporting would go to UTA and others and decide whether they've provided enough evidence that that should be a permanent route that maybe UTA could take over or some other permanent funding source could be discovered. So it's an interesting idea. It's close to, the governor had wanted, working with us, had wanted these transit innovation grants, maybe from general fund money, but through this kind of, it was a complicated process right till the end, but really came up with something maybe sort of similar, but with different funding sources. So I think it's going to be, it's going to take some work to get this put up in the next year or so, but hopefully it'll provide some great innovation and great opportunity for some areas that they think they're underserved for transit to kind of prove that there's a market there for transit.
Peter, we have a question from Kevin.
Do we have an idea of what staff demands is going to be placed on UDOT because of this program?
We really don't. We did get authorization to utilize $200,000 out of the fund to help put this process together and hopefully be able to staff this. It's a big unknown. You know, this is right now, the governor had asked for this to be statewide, and it was driven mostly by folks from rural Utah wanting to have some more flexible options to look at. Since this is Salt Lake County money, this is going to be isolated to Salt Lake County. If we get a proposal to start up a transit, I'll call it a transit service, we would probably, it would probably be contracted, because if you think about a 3-year pilot, you're not going to go out and buy buses and establish something that you have no back end in terms of how to keep going.
So basically, there's no ongoing money, there's one time, work it out, feel it out, go for it.
Ben?
Okay, thank you.
Well, and Ben might want to add to
Yeah,
this.
I think our initial thoughts is that as much as possible, we're going to leverage our existing TTIF process. So it's not going to be exactly the same, but if we cannot reinvent the wheel, because we already have experience with nominations and then ranking and then things like that. So the thought is initially, and we've got some great team here to kind of figure out actually how it works, but try to use as much of that framework as we can with a goal of keeping it simple for the cities and then keeping it simple for us as well. So finding that right balance and making it work with the commission process that we already do.
Peter? We're going to try, we'll make it work.
Oh, yeah, this just shows what some of the bullet points in the statute say that this innovation grants can be used for is anything that increases transit ridership or service in high growth areas, bus routes and services in high growth areas, and provide shuttle services that connect existing transit stations with jobs, recreation, or schools. As far as Representative Perucci is concerned, one of the things she's concerned is there's a new satellite or a new campus for Salt Lake Community College in Harriman, and it has no public transit service. So that would be one thing she would want. But the way the bill's written, you know, these are competitive grants, although I think it would be wise for us to take into account Harriman as we're considering some of these things. There's also parts of Utah County that we're quite involved in some of the fast-growing areas like Vineyard are really interested in increasing transit. This next bill is Open and Public Meetings Act amendments by Representative Dunnigan. For the most part, this is quite a good bill because I think the experience with COVID and how much improvements in Zoom and everything with electronic meetings, this really liberalizes the ability of open and public meetings like the Transportation Commission to do them all or partly electronic. And the only little key to it is that the public body needs a rule or a resolution allowing it and saying how it's used and talk about anchor locations and those things. The commission does have such a resolution, but it's a bit out of date. So I think we'll probably come back to you later this year, maybe with a proposal for an updated resolution just on that our open and public meetings resolution kind of conforms with this new statute. But that part's all good because I think it makes it easier to do electronic meetings. There is one new provision that I think is a bit unusual, and it's worth just keeping in mind. My understanding is that this comes from certain county commissions.
I have a difficulty on the word predetermined, supposed to be, or there's a misspelled. It says deliberate way to predetermine. Okay, thank you.
That's my spelling, so no, you spotted that.
Yeah, so I think this came from the fact that I think that there's some county commissions with 3 members that are being accused of 2 of the members predetermining all decisions that are made in public meetings. So, but the way this is written is kind of a little bit weird, but I think that's what they're trying to capture. It sounds like you can't even consider anything till you come to a meeting, which seems kind of an impossible standard. But anyway, individuals constituting a quorum of a public body may not act together outside a meeting in a concerted and deliberate way to predetermine an action to be taken by the public body at a meeting on a relevant matter. I think we'll be fine here, but it is kind of a thing to just to be aware of is that we can't have pre-voted something before we get here. So.
Okay. We usually don't present to you bills that did not pass, but this is something important here. Senator Ipsen proposed a bill, SB 170, Clean Truck Programs. And again, it didn't pass. What it was trying to do is create a program for turning in or retrofitting trucks to be electric vehicles, and that program was going to be run by DAQ, Division of Air Quality, but funded by some federal funds, carbon reduction program funds that UDOT gets. The commission, of course, normally would prioritize those as recommended by the department, and we kind of feel like we do a good job. The commission does a good job with that. The department does a good job with that, and we spoke with the sponsor a little bit about that, and he agreed to give us some flexibility, and so we're looking at that. And if funded, the program could still be administered by the Division of Air Quality, but expect maybe some conversations about this in the next months, and we'll probably have something for you to consider on that. Okay, just last slide here, just a couple of other items. Transit studies, the TTIF, they expanded the use of the TTIF to be able to use that no more than $500,000 a year for transit-type studies. Those studies would compete with all the other projects and potential items for the TTIF. If you remember, at some point last year, you revised your rule that defines airports of regional significance. And I mentioned to you that I was going to try to get that repealed because statute already defines that term, and it seemed unnecessary for the commission to do that. And we were able to get that done, so expect that rule to come to you for repeal at some time in the next few months. The TTIF match, as you can remember, the TTIF projects require a 30% match, and as we looked at that and saw the possibility of potentially proposing projects as a department, such as things at the point of the mountain and other types of projects, it didn't make sense to require the state to provide a match for the state. And so this would relieve UDOT proposed projects of that match requirement. Okay. Direction on the state plane, and just because occasionally the plane's used for commission meetings, I share this with you. As soon as we buy the new plane, which is going to happen later this year, UDOT is now going to keep the existing 200, which we think is going to help facilitate use of the plane, especially when one is down for maintenance and so forth. And then the smaller plane is going to be sent over to UVU. So, and then
What's the UVU connection there? I'm just curious. I was asking what the UVU connection is. I'm trying to think if it's a Salt Lake County, Utah County thing that doesn't have this statewide mission, so I'm just trying to understand.
This is for the plane, the UVU connection. They have a fairly significant commercial pilots training program.
That's what I was wondering.
And
yeah,
so,
makes
you know,
sense.
Southern Utah University is also looking at getting into this, but they wanted this to help train the mechanics and they do single engine now. This is a dual engine, the C90. And so this would help them grow that program. That's really the connection.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made sense.
awesome. I thought some of you might be interested in this second to last item here. It's just a way of honoring former Senator Garn and Governor Matheson. They are naming a US 6 rest area that's close to the Thistle landslide. These folks were instrumental in helping mitigate those impacts and getting funding for that. And then also designating the Jake Garn Legacy Highway on US 40 between I-80 and basically that first light just before you get to Heber. And the idea there is that former Senator Garn was able to get a lot of money for the funding of the dam there, the Jordanelle Dam. So, and then last but not least is the state local project bid limit. Currently, there's a $190,000 bid limit for projects that we do ourselves. Everything else, anything above that, we have to put out for, RFP for bid. And so there was a $125,000 bid limit established back in 2001, and it's grown, based on CPI to $190,000. And Senator Winterton and some local governments thought that should be raised because it makes it hard to do certain projects like a chip and seal where there may not be a lot of interest from the private sector in doing those projects. And so this will be a great benefit, I think, to some of our crews and things, but without getting too far into the business of the private sector. I think this is a nice balance for that. And it also changes the index from the CPI to the construction cost index, which is a little bit faster growing. So hopefully that'll help keep that number where it needs to be. So, but that's all we have. So we're done with the legislative update. If you have any questions, we're happy to help you.
Any questions on legislation? There was a lot more behind the scenes, but now we'll get into the money.
I just have to say how obvious it is that our legislature really does care about infrastructure and transportation, and they're doing these things so well. No wonder we lead the nation in so many ways, so thanks again to our legislators.
You'll see that with the money.
Okay, we're going to talk about UDOT's funding in a couple different buckets, and our list is growing. No go? Okay. Is that better? Okay. We're going to talk about UDOT's funding in the various buckets we have it in, and our list keeps growing longer of our bucket. So this is representative of the ongoing funding that UDOT is receiving in 2025, fiscal year 25, which is $2.4 billion overall. You can see the largest portion of our funding is in our Transportation Investment Fund. That's about nearly 53% of our funding, followed by the Transportation Fund, which is in orange, and then federal funds is our third largest. And then we have a number of funds that are smaller and make up all those little slivers. For one-time funding in fiscal year 25, we received a large portion in TIF, just under $500 million, and then we received about a little over $25 million in our transportation fund, and we'll go through the details of those when we talk about each fund. For the purposes of this workshop, we'll focus primarily on the funds that the commission prioritizes.
May I ask one question then?
Yeah.
If we're not going to talk about federal highway funds much, is that fair? We're going to, then I'll wait.
Yep.
I'll wait.
When we talk program recommendations, it's really the transportation fund. So the transportation fund, that's basically the state gas tax vehicle registration. The federal funds is primarily, the 18.4 cents of federal gas tax and other fees that go there as well. That makes up those two funds. Those two funds are really what we come to the commission to take care of what we have, the asset management. So the program recommendations are primarily a combination of those two funds.
I follow. My question, Carlos, was I was just wanting to understand the latest on how much money we send to Washington in federal gas tax and how much we get back, and whether we're a net plus or a net minus.
Yeah, I mean, that was, the donor-donee issue was a question, was a battle for many, many years, going in ever since the interstates were finished, because the interstates were a cost to complete, so it was kind of a blank check that we all had across the country. But starting with Ice-T in the 92, I think it was, or 93, it's really, has been this internal struggle between the states, between those states that send more money to Washington versus those that send less and get more back. And, that was it was almost like an argument you might have between, should the House of Representatives control or should the Senate control? And the rural states were getting more back than they were sending to Washington, and the big states, the Californias, the Texas, the Floridas, New York, were sending a lot more than they were getting back. We have historically, when you look at both the highway funding and the transit funding, we've historically been about a break-even state in Utah. I would say states are getting more back now, seeing that the Highway Trust Fund is just almost 50% of that funding now is coming from the general fund. And so states are benefiting from the fact that Washington has an uncontrolled spending urge. And
so there's more in that than our collective highway taxes or gas taxes.
Our gas taxes, we are slowly seeing a diminishing influence of our gas taxes. We expect in 3 years we'll need a new authorization. We expect we'll cross the 50% line, and we'll see, and that's even if they keep it flat, because it's harder for Congress to cut than it is to add. They will, I expect that we'll be below 50% in terms of the influence of the gas tax on, so that whole connection to what we call a user fee, people pay for what they use, we're disconnecting that.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so we're first going to look at the Transportation Fund, which is our orange slice of our pie, our second largest funding that UDOT manages. These are the revenue sources of the Transportation Fund. So as Carlos mentioned, it's primarily funded by a gas tax between regular and diesel fuel. It also receives, special fuel is diesel. We also get registration fees in there, permits, taxes, fees, and interest and other things. This fund funds our day-to-day operations of UDOT. And on this next slide, you'll see how we use this fund. Those unhighlighted line items at the top are people and what we're doing on a day-to-day for, engineering and operation and maintenance. Our largest, the largest amount that goes out of the use of this fund goes out to other sources, B&C roads, and then we transfer some funding into our other funds that we manage.
Sure.
And,
If I could. So the legislature allocates monies to these different line items. And so that's what they do. Our IGG committee, Infrastructure General Government, they go through our budget on a continual basis, and they make the allocations of how much to go into support services, engineering service operations. And then, basically what's left over ends up in highway systems construction. That's the money that the commission has to program. B&C is code. That's the money that goes to cities and counties by legislative formula. Sheriff's office makes that distribution every 2 months. Sorry to interrupt, Sheriff.
no, that's great.
May
Thank
I
you.
interrupt also to ask, how much income do we get from tolling on the roads currently? Ballpark.
Lou, it's about like that safe sidewalk.
Yeah, see that little
You see
white
the safe sidewalk? It's kind of like that.
It's less than that.
It's,
Fair enough. That's good. Let's keep going.
Commissioner, Troy, I think we brought that to the commission a couple months ago in terms, we have a tollway restricted account. It's basically what we have doing through the Express Lane program. Do you remember off the top of your head because we've asked the commission to program money out of there, or we will?
Yeah, so when we came to commission, I think it was back in like August, we asked to spend about 1.2 million, I believe is the number. And there was a lot of, and that goes everything from, paying for our back office, buying the passes, whatnot, and then also the maintenance and upgrade that goes along with that, so.
So
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, the tollway restricted account, the monies that are, that we toll, that has to stay within that facility that's being tolled. So that's by statute. So we ask the commission to allocate money, and that helps pay for the operation and maintenance. And we come out with a small, I'll say, profit that we come to the commission to do capital projects. Like, we're going to have to very soon redo all the technology really on the Express Lane
We talked
system,
about that,
because
right.
they tend to last 8 to 10 years, and we're due for an up. You're going to correct me, go ahead.
No, I'm going to correct myself. It was $2 million, not 1.2. Friends in the back for correcting me.
Okay.
Thank you, Grant.
Thank
Keep
you.
an eye on us, everyone.
Quality control here, quality control.
And, Natalie pointed out safe sidewalks. That's an interesting program. It's its own line item, $500,000 every year. It's stayed that amount for the last 30 years, hasn't changed. And it's an interesting program that the regions administer, working with local governments to try to improve, sidewalk systems. And we'll be very flexible where some communities will provide in-kind labor or land.
Right.
But it's just a very interesting
It
little
popped for
program.
me, not just because of the size, but you think of that as a local function more, but you help there. And I will just say, I live in Murray City, and we pride ourselves on having these terrific sidewalks throughout the city. And whenever I'm in cities that don't, I'm always like, what are they thinking? When you just don't have any interface for the pedestrian.
Sheriff, sorry.
Yeah, no, so as Carlos mentioned, the way the transportation fund is structured is the legislature determines our spending levels at most line items. The highlighted line item, highway systems construction, is what takes all the revenue that's not otherwise distributed, and that's what the commission prioritizes. As far as one-time funding, the transportation fund received that small orange slice of 25.7 million. And that was all legislatively directed. 25.5 of it is pass-through funding for Power District Transportation Study, the St. George Airport Control Tower, Cache Valley Transit District for bus storage and maintenance facility, and the Provo Airport Terminal expansion. And then
Those will be pass-throughs for us to the folks.
yes. And then UDOT will keep $250,000 for the Pando Protection Project, which that circled part directs us to use it for cattle guards and fencing along SR 25 as funding allows.
Pando?
Okay. I was waiting for the question. So those were all done through the RFA process, where folks will get a legislator to sponsor a request for money. Kurt will be implementing this Pando project. Kurt, what is Pando and what is this for?
Pando is the group of aspen trees. It's a one living organism, and they call it a pando, and that happens up at Fish Lake.
Fish Lake.
Yeah. Yep. So this project is to protect that, to almost barricade it, and provide so that they can continue to have the growth of this, and we'll participate in trying to do the road work, the cattle guards with this money, and I know that they have their groups that will be continuing the fencing around it, so it'll be a partnership, and we'll get this taken care of.
Who's been the leader on this?
The leader?
Yeah, has it been through an elected official or more from public servants in UDOT, or?
Do you have that?
No, it was, I don't know, Leif, if you remember who was the sponsor. The legislative sponsor wasn't the champion for this project. There's a private.
Representative Albrecht.
But
Good
he
for
carried
him.
this, he cared passionately about it, but there was a private group that was interested in trying to, the proposal was 400,000? I can't remember.
It should have been, yeah.
But it was much higher, and this is what the legislature ended up on. So we're not going to be able to do the full concept, but it's a start, and we'll probably be doing cattle guards with this.
This is example of like the little things that matter. Pretty, yeah, I'm impressed.
I mean, that speaks to the process where, folks can have an idea, find a legislator that thinks it's also a good idea, and then, they find a way to get some funding for it.
I mean, someone will know this better than I do, but this is the only place in the world that has this, right? Of this size and magnitude.
This size, yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty impressive.
Okay, that we'll move to the federal funding review.
Vegetation protection. Who knew?
All right.
So
looking at our federal funding.
Ivan, sorry, I can't. Shara went through the piece on the TIF, the increase, the one-time money on the TIF. It didn't add up to, you probably heard the number $1.1 billion. There's two, and I don't know if it's further in the presentation, so shut up, Carlos.
Okay. So we're going to talk for a second about the federal aid highway program that we have. It represents about 18% of our ongoing funding. Every year, the state of Utah receives federal aid highway program funds in these different categories. Many of these different categories have specific uses that we can program projects to. So what you see is the fiscal year 25 estimate that we're working for, the 25 estimate that with a state match, and then the pass-through, and the pass-through could be for the MPOs, joint highway, and there's even some state planning and research that passes through the commission, but directly to UDOT for our planning and research. I think one thing to note later on when we start looking at the 26 and 27 years that we're forecasting, in 2026, the IIJA expires, and we're carrying our federal programs flat from 26 to 27. That's our forecast. So all of these programs in 26 into 27, there'll be no change in the federal funding.
So that's a self-determined strategy. It's the one that we've used over the last 4 reauthorization cycles. And it's just a guess. You know, I believe it's harder for them to cut off of where they're at. And that, you know, the worst thing is if we ask you guys to program projects and programs at a level and we have to pull that back. And so it's easier to add. Believe me, we always have a list of things that we can ask you to fund. So that's our deliberate strategy in this. You'll see other states take different approaches. You'll see some not even program projects in those out years, and they think that the alarmness approach sometimes will help spur Congress to get a reauthorization. We prefer to just play. We think this is a realistic and conservative approach.
So one thing we've done in the past to just show the different types of funding, because when we get to the point of talking with the commission about the programs that we'll be funding, we don't get into what kind of money it is. Sometimes we call it the color of funding, but we don't talk about what federal aid program that it would be coming through. Often we just talk about the amount of money that we're proposing to the commission for funding in these programs. So if we're looking through it on our left-hand stack, the slide before that, our federal aid highway funds, the dark blue color, it totals to $543 million that will be coming into the state of Utah. The transportation fund from Shara's presentation earlier, this is the highway systems construction line item. This is the amount of state funding that is available to UDOT and the commission to program on projects, as well as $21 million from the Transportation Investment Fund that we use for preservation on roadways and bridges that were built through the TIF program. So after we take those total amounts down here in this section called the adjustment section, you'll notice our federal aid, our pass-through of $110 million, and then we actually increase our federal program by decreasing our state transportation fund, and that's to provide the match to our federal dollars. So when we say it is a federal dollar, every federal dollar includes the match that's required, which then gives us our 3 categories here: our federal aid, our state transportation fund, and our state TIF for the preservation and maintenance, which gives us a total of $625 million to program in 2025.
Ivan, you mentioned the pass-through. You want to mention who that goes to?
The pass-throughs could be to the MPOs. Joint Highway Committee also has a piece that they'll be proposing projects to the commission for funding, but the majority of that funding goes to the MPOs.
I just want to kind of put a point on, I know that there was a question about the federal funding and everything. The agenda for this workshop was very strategic in building this equation that you're seeing here. Sheriff first talked about the orange piece, the 171. I think it was 170.9. We got a little rounding on this slide, so significant digits here. But so the transportation fund plus the federal funds with the addition of the little bit of TIF for preservation, that makes up all of those together. I think what Ivan is just presenting, that is the main programming that we do for assets. So we kind of tried to build this agenda to say, here's the state funding, here's the federal funding, you add those 2 together, and then now we're going to work into the programming recommendations for that. And then to the point of what Carlos is asking, then we will talk about some capacity programs which are separate from this. So it's all, this team does a great job of systematically building the math equation here to provide the backup for the recommendations that come up for the programs.
Great. I don't know who to address the question to, and it's a little provocative, but just to plant the seed. If a commissioner thought that Region 3 and Region 2 should jointly consider a study to look at the Wasatch Front Regional Council and Mountain Land doing a study on the benefit of combining those two. Would that need to come from the legislature in a bill? Could it be proposed at the commission level? It just is something I've thought about for some time, and I'm wondering if you thought that was a good idea, how would you implement that?
Yeah, so that is.
Just a study, not doing it, but just trying to understand. And the way I'm thinking about that, everyone, is that increasingly the urban spaces are, completely integrated. And so the modeling and the transportation prioritization and stuff shouldn't follow a political line like the point of the mountain. It should be more regional. And I think there's value in at least understanding if that would make sense.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The question's been asked before, back in the early 2000s, when we started doing the I-15 EIS and the Frontrunner EIS going from Salt Lake down into Utah County, because we had two MPOs with two different traffic models, and we needed to make sure that they were consistent. And there was a lot of discussion about that, and at that time it was felt the best thing to do would be to create the Joint Policy Advisory Committee, JPAC, that meets every 3 months. And the purpose of JPAC is to basically resolve those boundary issues between the two MPOs. Now, if somebody felt that that should be studied and looked at, that would be something that the governor could propose or the legislature could propose. It's not within a commission role to make that statement, but certainly in your role as a transportation commission, you can have that discussion. You can
look
ask,
at my commissioner to
you
the
can
left here and
you
say
can
we
ask
should
the
talk.
questions and have that. But you can obviously think about this. There's probably a little bit of politics involved in that type of conversation.
Yeah, and my thinking here is, not to be provocative on the politics side, as much as to say we're a mid-sized state that has added 1 million people since 2002. What used to be green fields separating Salt Lake and Utah County have filled in, and I worry that we should think more in an open-minded way about the technical reasons why that would make sense. I love our collaboration and our commissions and things, but if the world is changing, we need to change too.
I think, I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead. I think it's a valid question to ask. I think our MPO partners and our legislators need to be the ones to kind of carry forward that question. I could tell you, rest assured that the technical people, both at the department, at UTA, at Mountain, and at Wasatch Front, are making it work. They are making that connection work. And so, it's going to be a question of, big fish in a small pond. I mean, Ivan, that's your pond analogy. And so there would always be that concern. So I think it's a valid conversation, and I think your point is probably being heard by others right now.
Yeah, have other, urban areas done this where MPOs have combined?
I believe so. I think it's difficult. And,
Sometimes the candle's not worth the game.
It would have been easier 20 years ago. Things don't usually get easier with time.
Especially when you grow, especially locals.
Exactly.
Locals really like that.
Who really likes it?
Jim, do you want to say anything? Microphone, please.
Knowing what's going on about the growth that's projected, she knows, now would be the time, because it's going to not get any easier as they're growing down there, and the amount of the population that's shifting down there. I don't know if the local people, the officials would want, it'll be interesting.
The central point is that it is a single commuter shed at this point.
It is, yes.
And so.
And we're modeling it that way. I mean, the MPOs are modeling it as a single commuter shed.
Certainly, now's the time to talk about it.
Did I make you guys mad? No. Where's Lenise? Are you mad? Did I make you mad? No, no. Our MPOs. Microphone, maybe?
This is a delicate thing. You want me to say anything else?
I paid for this.
Thank you, Carlos. Lenise Davenport, MPO Director for Mountain Land Association of Governments. I think, too, Carlos is really good point. I think 20 years ago, this is a worthy conversation and an easier, probably, exercise to go through. I think it's important to reiterate how well we work together as MPOs, the Mountain Land Association of Government and the Wasatch Front Regional Council and the other MPOs in the state work really, really, really closely together with UDOT and UTA. So I think it's something we could look at, but and maybe go from there.
Thanks. I did want to speak for the MPOs. I don't know. Are you okay, Wayne? Or do you want to say something? Wait, okay, Wasatch Front says nothing to add. Keep asking questions like that, Natalie.
Okay, any other questions on the money side before we start talking about our programs and recommendations? Nate, I'll come. Musical chairs.
I think they want you to go over there.
Nathan's a lot of fun to work with. He's a good person.
Good morning, Commissioners. We're going to spend a bit of time now talking about funding recommendations and the allocation distributions that we'd recommend you consider for each of the different programs that manage most of the assets for the department. To start that conversation, I'll just talk a little bit about where we keep the information for the public related to our strategic goals. We have on UDOT's website, we have our strategic direction. It's always kept and maintained live in that particular space. When you log into the strategic direction, this is what you see right now in this particular space. And I'm going to open it and go live here for a minute and just point to a few things that are there. So Shara talked about some funding this morning and just kind of where they are. Here's a few of those statistics about what goes on in the organization. There's nearly 1,800 employees that we employ here at UDOT. About 1,300 of those are what we call core employees. And the turnover rate's been around 12% for the last couple of quarters. We use the governor's definition for urban and rural. So urban is the Weber, Davis, Salt Lake, and Utah counties. That's how he describes in his One Utah, the urban and rural breakout. But anyway, on that breakout, our working force is broken into about 43% in rural and 56% in the urban area. And about 40% of the workforce that we have works in the maintenance area itself. We have a number of different items that are in here, and I'm going to open this, and it'll go to our annual statistical summary. And this is where we produce most of the information that people look for statistics related to our highway assets and information. So what you'll see on the screen right here is the annual VMT, that's the vehicle miles traveled. You can see a breakdown that close to 70% of that is on UDOT facilities. The other 32% are on either county, municipal, federal, or other routes, tribal routes. On this right over here is the centerline mileage. Remember, centerline means that when you're driving down the interstate, it's just 1 mile for each. There might be 5 or 7 lanes or whatever, but it's just 1 mile for each of those lanes. So you can see by centerline miles what the different breakdowns are, but you can see by volume of traffic in that how the different facilities are used. A couple of other notes that you might just see in this particular space. Here again breaks down, in this particular case, this is the federal definition for urban and rural. You can see what the breakdown is for urban and rural traffic volumes, as well as you can see how that breakdown is on interstate and the others that are there. So within the strategic direction, you can find that information. We'll talk about bridges a little bit later. You also can find information about our assets. Maybe we'll just go there for a second because we'll be talking about this area. So our assets are broke up into what we call 3 tiers. One of those is a performance management tier. One of those is a scheduled tier, which is tier 2, and one of those is a reactive tier. So for example, what you'll see today, all of these performance management items like pavement bridges, ITS devices, signals, pavement striping, you'll see all of these with programming recommendations. You'll also see once in a while some items that are in these areas like culverts and walls and that have regularly scheduled needs to show up in recommendations. And then you'll see this portion down here of all these types of items that we maintain through either the maintenance funds or special projects when some type of special need or problem, landslide, something of that nature occurs. So it just gives you a little bit of breakdown about where that is, how the departments' asset values are.
We have
It's
a
okay.
question.
Oh, I just wanted to make the observation that when I mentioned that UDOT is uber, sophisticated and innovative, this makes that point. And I wonder just, Carlos, do other transportation departments in our peer states have this level of intelligence publicly available?
All the states are working in the asset management area. Nathan is involved nationally in these. Nathan, do you want to respond to that? Where are we relative to the rest of the country? We let out on a lot of this stuff, but
I'm just always
everyone's
stunned at the
getting there.
detail that's so already organized and available.
One of the things that I'd say Utah does really well at is the tiered asset structure and having a performance management structure for specific items. Across the country, pavements and bridges have relatively similar approaches, I'd say, in most of the states. Some are better than others, and some take a different approach. But they have some type of specific management there, mostly because the federal government funds a large portion of money we talked about earlier in the planning and research fund areas to make sure that those programs are protected. So everything from the interstate highway system that was originally funded to maintaining a core element on bridges, and we'll talk today about the bridge fund that was added with the last bill, why those are there. Most states have those. Outside of that particular area, it's really up to the individual states, how they manage and where they appropriate their funds. And you'll see in our funding distribution that Shara had about, it's less than 18% of the funds are coming from the federal government now. So this strategy that you're looking at up here on the screen is really important because this guarantees that with all the infrastructure you're building, everything that's coming through TIF, TTIF, all those other things, that we have an asset management strategy that accommodates and makes sure that we can maintain what's being built. And that request that comes in quite regular about how much additional revenue is needed in order to maintain those systems, and we may talk a little bit about that today with some of these assets.
Nathan uses the term maintain, but we're maintain and operate. That day-to-day operations is a big part of it as well.
Other questions?
May I just ask that 49,000 miles center line, is that including all roads? Because on the previous chart, there was county and there was city and
So
does those add up to 49,000? I'm just ballpark, I guess.
Yeah, so this 49,000 this is the breakdown of the 49,000.
But UDOT's responsible for more than 5,000 out of the 49,000.
Well, not of centerline miles. So this is what's important. These numbers come up, and lots of times they're there. If you think of all the city streets, the local urban county roads that are there, maybe 20 feet wide, that totals into all those as far as a centerline mile, 1 mile for everything that's there.
Okay.
But for UDOT, a lot of our centerline miles are 5, 7, 8 lanes wide. So if you take total lanes, it's a completely different conversation. And that's why we talk about the VMT. This 6,000 centerline miles accommodates 70% of the vehicle mileage traveled in the state.
Very helpful, yeah.
Okay, so questions people ask about B&C road distribution, that kind of stuff, a lot of that's tied to this, and a little bit of it's tied to this, because there is some cost necessary to maintain any type of road, but there's also a lot of costs related to the volume of truck traffic, the damage that
Well,
could
and that's a
occur.
big one. Trucks, about 90% of the trucks, I believe, are on the state system as well.
Interesting. Can you scroll down just a little bit on that centerline mileage by county? It's not often that you see San Juan right up there with Salt Lake and Utah, but that's because of the concept of centerline versus lane miles.
Yeah,
We have in Region 2 incredible amount of lane miles.
I
but our
think that's
centerline
the,
is like San Juan.
yeah, I believe that's the part of the state Kirk referred to as God's country, right there. That's
The
it.
San Juan.
Thank you for the promo.
Yeah.
Millard County.
So not to continue sidetrack, but I'll move back in the space we're there. So within the strategic direction, those items are here and available for you. And then in this section here, it says strategic goals. We have 3 strategic goals. Now you can dive into these goals and look at different items, but what we're going to talk about today is the money that you fund in programs is what allows us to maintain these particular goals. So in the infrastructure goal, you'll see that we look at how we're performing in terms of ITS, bridges, pavements, and signals. What you're looking at when you look at these numbers down here is that we have an overall goal here of trying to get to 100%, and it says we're at 88. The orange is the portion that we're not achieving, if you'll say 100% of the goal. And then these 4 numbers that you see down here along the bottom where the cursor is, they represent the percent of breakdown that goes into that total. So pavements make up 30% of that goal's total score, right? How the pavements are performing themselves. And bridges make up 38% of that goal. Is that, I think that's what it says, right? So same thing then when we talk about mobility. This goal has changed for us. Okay, mobility in previous had different items in here. We had some snow removal and stuff. Now snow removal is one of the strategies that allows us to have reliability in our system and to reduce delay. And we've added the transit ridership goal into this area. So it's a new formulated and restructured goal for the department in terms of how we calculate our mobility score. And then in zero fatalities, the goal remains as it has for quite a while, related to both injuries, equipment damage for the DOT itself, and then crashes and fatalities with the public.
Thanks, Nate. So the 3 goals, 0 fatalities, optimize mobility, preserve infrastructure, those are in statute. The legislature says those are things you have to focus on. The technical folks working in an asset management team try to set the targets. The recommendations for programs that we provide to the commission are intended to help us meet those targets. And we have mathematical models. We measure the assets on a continual basis, each asset at a different interval. Pavements once a year, bridges every 2 years, unless Carmen thinks they're making her nervous or whatever. And so we measure that condition. We generate deterioration curves for each element. So we look to see how fast that condition is changing. And then based on where it is on that deterioration curve, we make recommendations for program amounts. So this is really the foundation behind those recommendations, is to try to meet or try to at least meet or hopefully exceed targets. But, we can't, we're not going to set a target that every pavement has to be perfect in the entire state all the time. That's financially absolutely impossible. So this is a balancing act between, pavements, bridges. And if you want to have a fun, 7-10-hour meetings, sit in a room with pavement people and bridge people and have them talk about which is more important, which needs more money. And Carmen's smiling at me because, of course you would.
Carlos, on the 0 fatalities, you mentioned this is codified. Do they use the term 0 fatalities in state code?
We reference it, but, it's a safety, it's a safety
Yeah, I'm
goal.
with you. The lawyers I know, they probably wouldn't use that term, but I don't know. I love it how you
We have a
use it.
lot of friends, lawyer friends, that contact us often.
Gotta love them.
And every commission meeting, Troy presents the safety over the last month.
Yeah.
He's doing it from this strategic plan. He's doing it off the live document. He's showing you the actual fatalities, the rates. When Carmen talks about the status on program delivery, it's not within the goals, it's below. We have that summary of how our program is doing. And so she's presenting it live from the strategic document. When we present to the legislature and we have to do annual reports, we use this strategic document to show how we are doing in terms of the results we're getting for the investments that we're making. So this is foundational to all of the recommendations.
So Commissioner Gochner, when we report annually on that legislative code, we report this fatality rate that's shown here. And so we have a goal to reduce fatalities by a specific amount each year related to this rate. So that's specifically how we report on the goal for zero fatalities in terms of the legislation.
And Brad will appreciate that signs are important to some of us on this commission. And we can, with the information we have, we know where every sign in this state is on the highways. And if they're a little bit not up to speed, then we talk about that sometimes.
Yes, we have a pretty good idea where they all are. And yeah, Commissioner Kramer's had a chance to look at our sign management system a little bit in terms of where there is, and he has some recommendations for how the department continue to grow and build that area. And when we come in May, as was asked by Commissioner Kramer, we will bring some information about sign projects and work that's done there. And today, where you're going to see that fall is it'll be in the Transportation Solutions line item. As far as programs, that's where you fund like sign improvement projects.
Yeah.
So you'll see that today, that's where that funding comes from, is in Transportation Solutions. In May, you'll see some of those projects coming from the regions on their list to address some of those needs to continue to improve our signage.
And the lesson is they're really expensive. So, thanks.
They're a lot bigger than you think.
You're a lot bigger than you think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Go take your picture back.
Any other questions on the strategic direction?
But this is just really good. You know, we've got it.
You can close that one too.
Yeah.
All right, so just recapped here that we're going to talk about the asset allocation requests that are tied to how we try to achieve these 3 strategic goals, as Carlos mentioned, is what we report on in statute. So let me explain the chart you're looking at here again. For some of you that have been here in years past, it's probably familiar. For others, we'll just explain what's going on. So the item that says on the left with all of the lists there, those are all the different program funds that we'll be allocating recommendations for funding for. In 2024, those are the programmed amounts that you've funded. Now that number will look slightly different right now than it did last year at this time because of the actions you took throughout the year as a commission. But currently where we stand for 2024, that's the funded allocation. In 25 through 27, you'll recognize 3 different colors. The blue colors, as mentioned earlier by Ivan and Carlos, those represent mostly federal funded programs that have an allocation funded to them that you've programmed previously. So once in a while there's a request to change one of those numbers in blue. If that happens, we highlight it. But those are previously programmed funds. The orange ones are the requests that are new for this year. So they're the ones in May we'll ask you to take an action on. So as a reminder, 2027 is outside of the current IIJA bill, but we'll assume a continuing resolution, and the numbers were set for the federal portions based on that flat rate that Ivan talked about. There also is a portion of state money that comes from the different projects that might be available in 2025 that will make up those totals. So the ones that you see in 2025 that are orange, those are pretty much all state-funded projects. And so they're only funded in orange because that's the money we have allocation in order to be able to have you program. The numbers in white are just projections for us about programs that we anticipate hopefully would be able to continue into the future. Any questions on how this works? Okay, so you'll see the same thing in every page. We'll keep the 2 numbers on the left the same, and then you'll see the new request. So to,
Nathan, if a commissioner had a question on what was that program? What's in a program? Where would they find that? A description of those programs?
well, two things. We'll show you later on some of these where there are specific ones that are there, like where would I find the details? We have some links that will be in your program file and you can find them. And then the other programs, some of them are self-explanatory. So like pavement itself, that represents all of the pavement work that we do, considering right-of-way to right-of-way pavement type project work that needs to be done in that specific area. We have a category for reconstruction, we have a category for rehab, and we have a category for preservation. But what you see in terms of programming is you see it rolled up into high volume and low volume programs. And it includes all those different strategies for pavement, whether it's preservation or rehab or reconstruction, they fall within these totals.
So again, in order to do the asset management process and to try to say, how do we maintain these targets or get to these targets, you have to look at it from a program level. That's why we make this first step. And when that's approved, then we'll be able to bring back what suite of projects would we propose to the commission in order to accomplish those targets within that program value. And so it's a deliberate step-by-step process.
So just as a basis for all the numbers that you'll see, again, over there on the left, under 2024, like for instance, for pavement, you'll see the 198.5, and then you'll see those numbers carried across through 2027. As a basis, they're all increased at about 2%, just over 2%, which is about a 1% increase that was in the bill for the federal amounts that have federal money, as well as some of the match and other expenditures that are there. But as a baseline, in any of these numbers, you're saying like, hey, how do you get these numbers? They're set at 2%. So you can get a feel for that. And then some areas where we've identified different asset needs, they may be a little bit higher than that.
And Nathan, if I were to put Carmen on the spot, 1% increase a year for pavement, what would you say off the top of your head Carmen construction inflation has been growing at?
Right now, I think we're back more in line about 8%, 8 or 9. So we're really not keeping up with inflation at this point.
Yeah, in 21 we were around 16%, 22 we went to 12% generally, down to 8%. We have been, we programmed TIF assuming 5%. So we're still running hotter than, so if you think about, if construction inflation is going at 8%, we're only increasing the funding at 1%. I'm sorry. Two. Sorry, Nathan. You can see kind of a trend of where things are going.
Well, for an asset base of $62 billion, that is just a minor part, and it's so key that we do that. Maybe for Brad's benefit, you can mention the difference between high volume and low volume. I'm sure he knows all this, but it's my excuse to.
The fire hose is this big.
Commissioner Kramer, that's a great question. Let me do that. And so I can't remember what year, 2015 area when they changed the gas tax, we divided the highway system into high volume and low volume road structures in order to just actually continue to preserve the structure we had. Because at that time when they changed the gas tax, we identified that the revenue wasn't enough to continue the maintenance at the level we needed, not to lose our condition goals. So when that happened, we split it into two particular areas, and low volumes represented, is it less than 1,000 trucks now? 1,080 T and 500 trucks. It's 100 trucks. Okay, so they're at 1,080 T and 100 trucks represent. So any road that has a less than 1,080 T, that's the daily traffic on it, or less than 100 semi-type trucks on it per day, is classified in the low volume category. And then those that are above that are classified in high volume. And so we'll show a few of the details. Carmen will talk about what the condition is to look at those. because also classifying them that way, we could see that if you didn't fund money or target enough money in some of those specific areas, how that had an effect on the economy and on the protection of homes and towns, even if maybe they're in rural areas versus urban areas. It gave a good distribution for maintaining the system in a way that was necessary when funding was really tight and our goals were higher than our ability to maintain.
Some of the items on your screen have asterisks. Explain those. Where you're going to have the explanation for those items, why you have the asterisks on next to them?
We will explain those, and I can go back here. They represent programs that are federally funded and contain specific project funding requirements. So that might mean that you don't have a lot of flexibility with that money. We can just give you projects and other things that fit the specific requirements of the federal program if they have an asterisk. And when we get to those, we can answer questions about it. So there was a discussion earlier about possibly using, was it the carbon protect money? There was a question about whether you could use that. I think you saw in the legislative update that it said, well, it needs to meet some of the qualifications, and I think they were asking, well, could DEQ possibly use some of that money because it would qualify for some of that use that might be a little different than how you've been thinking about using that money in just the transportation space. That's what those asterisks represent, is that type of thing.
And also, Nathan, with that explanation of the inflation of that 8%, you still keeping the 6 million contingency through 27? You think you're going to cover that?
Yeah, a question related to contingency. I think we've talked a little bit about that, the naming of that. That is that is separate from the project contingency that each individual project will carry.
Okay.
So that's an actual category for what we call like region contingency. So that's for, I don't know, maybe one of the region directors could best explain the types of projects that are used with that type of funding. But that's separate from an individual project's contingency to account for things like project-related inflation on that individual project. So there's probably, I don't know, there's probably a better name for that category to get rid of that confusion, but that's a specific program for doing certain types of projects.
Maybe specifically to answer that question as well, it was at 4 million a few years ago, and the commission raised it to 6. They increased it to $1.5 million at each of the regions to address all of those maintenance type projects or community type project needs that were there that don't fall within a program funding structure. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll just jump a little bit into the pavement. There's a couple of screens here, and I'm just going to have Carmen give you a little bit of an update on where they're at with pavement. And we'll, just a reminder that $2 million, that's the pavement management. That's the money that's used to actually calculate the needs for the pavement condition and to do some of the inspection and other things that need to happen in there. And you'll see that in a number of the assets. But we'll go through these for the high and low volume. So, Carmen, you want to cover these for me? Yeah, just tell me when you want to change.
Okay, great, thanks. So right now, we're going to kind of go into showing you the condition of the assets for pavement and bridge. We're going to start with pavement. And this is the high volume graph at this point. We show from 2015, and we're projecting out to 2027. As you can see with the funding level that we have requested as part of this, you can kind of see we're really maintaining our targets. The poor's dropping a little bit in the projected going out to 2027, but for the most part, we're really maintaining over the next few years with the funding we have requested.
And these projections are based on the proposed funding that we're going to put forward.
Yes, thank you. Based on the proposed funding that we're requesting. Okay, we'll go to the next one, please. And this is that the low volume pavement. And as you can see, and I think Nathan mentioned it, and I think Carlos mentioned it in the beginning too, like 2015 is when we took 5 million out of the high volume program, put it into the low volume, and you could see the difference that it made throughout the years.
Carmen, so Senator Van Tassel was the champion for this.
Oh,
So
perfect.
prior to 2015, back in the early 2000s, we realized we didn't have enough money for all our roads. And so that's when we separated them into what we called low volume, level 1 and level 2 is the terminology we used. And we said we can't maintain these roads that are low volume proactively. So no preservation, but we'll run out there and fill a pothole when we can. We kept showing these graphics of, at that time, so this is prior to 2015, the conditions were better for these low volume roads, but they were going down with the projections. And a certain senator from the basin didn't like that. And he was politically brave, and he kept pushing for a gas tax increase. So the 2015 gas tax increase, essentially, it wasn't in statute, but it was, if we had another $40 million to put into low-volume roads, we can start to turn that condition around. And, he tried to push 10 cents a gallon. We got 5 cents a gallon, and at that point, we said, we'll put 40 million into low volumes, and we'll put 15 million addition into bridges. And that was how that gas tax, that increase in gas tax has been used and still continues to be used at this point,
So there was a question by the department at one point whether we would combine them back into one asset system or not. The department right now, in looking at where we're at, noticed two things. One, you'll notice the proposal of that 40 million that's there for the low volume, as Carmen mentioned, is now going to be at 45. That there's actually a proposal that we need to increase the amount of money that's here to maintain the low volume, and the management structure seems appropriate to manage them still as these two different categories.
But this is a success story.
Yes. Okay, Nathan, we'll go. Moving on to structures, and I think there was the question before on where that funding goes into as far as that program. Rehab and replacement, preservation, and then the structures management. And so that's how the requested funding of 91 gets broken up into those other, basically, pockets of money. And as part of this, too, we have the carryover of the Bridge Formula Program of 45 million. Okay. Looking at the forecast for bridges, these numbers are based on the % of deck area. And as you can see, it's laid out the same with poor being in red. The yellow represents like a bridge that is a 5 condition. The red is a 4 condition. And then the high fare is, what would I say? It's 7 to 5. And then the good is like an 8 and 9 rating for condition. And so the reason we used to only show basically the good, fair, poor, but what we really were trying to figure out is what amount of that fair condition bridges will be dropping into 4. So that has helped us really look at the program as a whole. But, sorry, these are touchy. But you can see, even with the funding that we're requesting, the proposed funding, the bridge condition continues to deteriorate. Hope I covered that. All right, Nathan, we'll go to, and this is the non-NHS bridges, and you can see the same trend is happening here as well.
So
Does the
NHS,
national infrastructure...
National Highway System, sorry, Natalie.
Well, does the infrastructure bill passed in Congress help with this?
Well, the infrastructure bill, gets a lot of notice. It is
Always use the word bridges in it.
It's basically a reauthorization. And it was a good reauthorization. It had a little bit of an increase over the past authorizing bill, but it added on a lot of other programs, some good. I think the bridge program at $45 million a year, we're helping the local government bridges. That has been a great program. But it added on a huge amount of discretionary. So when we talk grants, That's what I mean by these discretionary projects. We can't be strategic with discretionary programs. It's a sugar rush because, odds of getting it are, there's very small odds. The formula money, the money that we know that's coming, is the money that, it didn't really increase that much. There was a little increase. It certainly didn't keep up with inflation. But that's what we use to plan and take care of what we have. So really, the formula money is the strategic money. And so, yes, the federal money is critically important for us to take care of what we have. Do we have enough? I mean, you see where our bridges are going here. Think about yellow as liability.
It reminds me, that our legislators need to understand this because it signals, some sort of one-time or injection. I'm sure Mr. Van Tassel likes that.
So one of the things we'll mention for you that you'll look at today, we're going to show you the local network next, and then Carmen's going to talk a little bit about that bridge formula funding, which all of that money's been targeted to the locals. Now the funding itself, about 15% of it needs to go to the local network that's there. The other 85% is at the discretion of the commission to program where they want. So there will be two things in our recommendation. One, we'll recommend that you program the assumed money, that this program actually will continue, either by continuing resolution or a new bill, but we won't program any new projects to it until we have a little bit more assurance that that would actually happen. And you may see recommendations coming from the department for this money in the future, that it won't be 100% to the local bridge system because of the conditions you're seeing here. We may recommend that we transfer some portions of those funds to allocate to the highest need across all of the various bridges.
And I want to be clear here. You see on the left axis, vertical axis, this is deck area. Our bridges are safe. I want everyone to know that. Our bridges are safe. Carmen and her team and the regions would not allow a bridge to be open if it was not safe. We inspect every bridge in the state, local state bridges, at least once every 2 years. Some bridges get more attention as they get older, but our bridges are safe. We're managing our bridges. This is the stuff, these are the potholes you hit as you go across the bridges. That's what and I think this represents probably what you're seeing and feeling out there.
Okay, thanks, Nathan.
We have over 3,000 bridges.
So with this graph is just representing the non-NHS, and so really this is just the local system. But you can see all three of these graphs are related to each other with the trend. This basically shows the state-owned bridges based on condition in the decade that they were built.
Carmen, we have a question here.
Yes, sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. How many dollars do we currently have allotted for this project and what we're going to be looking at this year?
For which project?
For bridges?
I believe there's 91 million total.
So, but again, that isn't the only money that is, there's money coming out of some projects like TIF projects and other projects.
Yes.
where we will do bridge work. And we reap the benefits of those capacity projects on helping our infrastructure. But in terms of money dedicated solely to doing bridge work, it's what you see here.
So
yes,
this is solely, and then we add the others in.
And then we benefit from those other capacity projects that you program.
So what did we, and this is off the wall, but for my mind's thinking is, what were we spending in 2020?
About 50 million.
About 50?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we're increasing it, but we're
Oh,
still.
Yeah, we've
Yes.
made some significant
Of course,
increases.
part of that's inflation and costs.
Yes.
And we're also going to talk about the Reconstruct program, and you'll see that it has some specific recommendations towards bridge as well, which was an addition you added a couple of years
And
ago.
we use the term reconstruct, rehabilitation, and preservation. Those are three different strategies. And if you think of it, simply, preservation's working from the top down. So maybe taking off a top layer and putting on a new top layer. rehabilitation, you're going deeper into the pavement. Reconstruct, you're basically tearing it out from the bottom because your foundation's done and you're working from bottom up.
And my observation as I drive the state, it seems like there's certain areas that are impacted more than others. And I look at that and I contribute some of it to weather. And other areas that aren't, weather and load.
Yeah, if you were to look at a chart that looks at easel weights, so trucks, the curve is a very steep exponential curve in terms of the impact on pavements and bridges as the weight increases. You would hardly really notice the impact on our structures and pavements with cars. It's trucks that create the damage.
Well, and unfortunately though, everything we get comes on a truck.
Exactly. That's part of our job, is to help move the trucks.
So one of the questions that was asked early on was about our management structure or the performance management versus maybe just planned project work and if other states are like that. This graph here shows how that structure actually works because what Carmen's group represents here is the same data you were looking at, but by the age of the bridge. So we don't just replace them on a schedule by age, we actually manage them by their performance. But age is a big component to think about, and this helps you see just how bridges in those different age categories might be performing. So that's how that question you asked earlier ties into the data you're looking at here now.
Yeah, and as you look at this, you can see the effect of the interstate building, the 60s, 70s, and 80s when we finished the interstate in Utah. You can also, back in that time frame, we were designing bridges, design life, 45 years, Carmen?
Yeah, 50.
50. And, so we're getting more life out of our bridges, and now we're doing 75 years, right?
Yes, it's 75 today.
But even to get to 50 requires constant maintenance on those bridges. You don't just build them and walk away.
Right, using preservation and rehabilitation techniques, will prolong the life of these bridges. But you can also see, like from 1970, going backwards in the decades, you can see how many bridges were built. And so it represents, the other graphs where the condition's going down because they are reaching their service life. So it all kind of ties together. This is the Bridge Formula Program. There's actually a dashboard that's on the UDOT website as well. So this has been going for 3 years. I believe it started in 2022. And right now, there's 90 bridges, most of them local. And with the program, we have 50% of those 90 bridges are either in design or construction. So the program is moving.
Average age of the bridges, 63.
Yeah, getting into the reconstruction program, we're basically, I think it's that 2% increase that we are requesting for the 79 million. And here's how we've been allocating that reconstruction program funding. You can see how we've defined the criteria for pavement and for a standalone bridge project. So really what we're trying to do is every 5 years to have a standalone bridge project. And the criteria for that they're listed here. But that is for these major bridges. Very long bridges, total bridge length, they carry traffic. And it's really a bridge that to replace would be over 35 million. And we have many of those in the state. And so in 2027 is what we're proposing to do, just a bridge project. And I believe the funding for that is estimated like in the $70 million range, if not more. We're still at a concept phase for that.
So with this particular program, as for those that are new to the commission, it was all pavement reconstruction program that we started in 2017. So you added $50 million a year in 2017 to address pavement needs. And then starting in 2024, we introduced that standalone bridge criteria that's over there on the right side. as part of the mechanism for prioritization. And so this shows just the split of when you compare the pavements and the bridges, those highest needs that are in this category, where they would end up. And if you want to make changes to that program in the future, you can, but that's where we stand today.
Yeah,
Right, and for these bridges that are in this program, I mean, you can even see, like, what we're requesting is 91 million. That's one bridge. That would take the whole program for that year.
We, internally, we had started back in the, prior to the reconstruct program, calling them sleeping giants. We had these pavements, bridges kind of sitting there, and we knew they were going in the wrong direction, and we had no idea how we were going to just rebuild them. And I think I-215 out here might have been the first one in that reconstruct program when we rebuilt the pavement out here on I-215.
Which one?
215?
Oh, 215.
Right outside the office here
Yeah.
was the first one. But we have sleeping giants out there that are big cost and difficult to fund because they take the entire statewide program to
Yeah.
do one
Yeah.
section.
You're talking replacement versus.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yikes.
Yep.
How many bridges are longer than 1,000 feet in this dry state? I'm just curious. They're just
I
ballpark,
don't
5%?
necessarily know that number, but we do have, I don't know, Cheryl's here. Do we know? 35.
You know that.
Of course, I was going to.
Of course, they're over there. We can look it up quick. Yep.
There you
But.
go. Wow,
yeah.
that's really impressive.
Okay, Nathan.
Yikes.
All right, well, thank you.
Give me the county.
I was just going to say, if there's ever like a UDOT Jeopardy thing, my money's on all the people over there in that area of our team.
Great. So the next programming area we want to talk about is REL, and we've made a couple of adjustments and changes here, as well as some alignment in the organization. So I'm just going to have Troy talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in REL, and he'll answer a few questions for you here.
Yeah, so rail, we created a rail division within the operations group this last year. Legislatively, we're also looking at creating potential, still in language that we may have it, creating I wanted to say oversight, but a rail safety division. But at this point, we're still ramping up on that, but we have a group. We're expanding and really putting our expertise toward creating a rail group. Part of that rail division, we transferred $2.1 million from our HSIP program that we've used to administer the HSIP is our Highway Safety Improvement Program, and that's federal funding we get to administer, safety improvements on our infrastructure. Part of that money goes into rail improvements, and what we call the SSO, or State Safety Oversight, which is it's from FTA that tells us that we need to be oversight of our
So it's a federal requirement after some of the big metro and the DC subway crashes. It was obvious then to Congress there was no safety oversight over light rail operations, subway operations. FRA, Federal Railroad Administration, does the safety oversight over heavy rail, the Class 1 railroads, primarily the Class 1s, but also the short lines. And so probably 15 years ago, Congress said there needs to be safety oversight and that the states needed to be ones to do that. So right now, part of this money is a takedown of the local sales tax from Salt Lake County prior to the tax commission sending it to the county, who then the county sends it to UTA. That comes to us. And so we do light rail safety oversight for the design, construction, and operation. And since light rail is only in Salt Lake County, that's where a portion of this 2.1 million is coming from.
Yeah, so in that rail division, we've got the light rail oversight that Carlos just mentioned, as well as we're creating that the heavy rail office that's helping with inspections, all of our diagnostics we do to help with the locals and on projects will be administered through this group.
Commissioners, any other questions about rail?
Yeah, I want to just mention something. And Leif, I did not pay attention to your presentation. I apologize. Did you mention the $800,000? So one of the, I would characterize as one of the most significant things that came out of this legislative session is you're all aware that we've had some challenges working with our railroads. And it's had a negative impact on the schedules of our projects, getting agreements on our railroads. And a lot of this has been driven by the fact that Union Pacific started initiating a requirement that the local governments and the state, whenever we have a crossing over the railroad, an at-grade crossing, that we have to enter into an agreement to pay the operations and maintenance of the railroad's crossing equipment. And that had never been something that we or the local governments had to do, so it was brand new. They started with a pretty high price and wanted to have escalators in it that they completely controlled. And it basically brought any project that was crossing a railroad to a stop. We were able to, the last week of the session, make an agreement with Union Pacific, and legislative leadership supported it, that out of the rail restricted account, we're able to now pay, so the department will administer this out of this office. We will pay the costs for, and we very much negotiated we think a good deal, but we will be paying the cost for every rail crossing. There's like 1,700 in the state, whether it be city, county, or state. We'll pay that ongoing maintenance and operation costs for that signal equipment. This will greatly streamline our ability to deliver projects. And I've had multiple mayors reach out and just say it's a great relief for them. So we are now taking over the responsibility in the rail division of being that entity to work with all the local governments and with Union Pacific to get agreement on what we need for these rail crossings. And UP likes it because they want to deal with one entity, not every individual city and county. And so that, I think, was a big deal, and that's what this rail division office is going to be doing as well.
Is that money enough to handle? I mean,
that is
1,700 crossings.
We did a good negotiation. Well,
bless you. That's tough. And where was Senator Van Tassel?
It took 2 years.
Yeah, I bet. Nathan Anderson looked like he was 6'5" when he started and beat him down. Yeah.
Could I quickly just add that we quickly say that a rail division was formed. What wasn't said was that 3 people from Region 2 formed the rail division. Not that I'm bitter, but just putting that out there.
And we're still, I'm sorry, we're still expanding.
Overstaffed again.
I think that goes to that 12% turnover rate that Robert's getting at.
Well,
This is off topic, but still in the rail. Did we solve the high-speed rail controversy with Idaho? Like, are we on track again? On track, a good.
Again, that was never high speed. It was reestablishing what was prior Amtrak service. So it was never going to be high speed.
Did we resolve the problem?
Well, so you're talking about what was referred to as the corridor ID program. And so the city of Boise was the one who was pushing and really running that effort, going from Boise to Salt Lake. The state had to be the submitter, so the state DOT had to be the entity that submitted. So they submitted to the corridor ID program. They had a technical issue with their application, so it was not considered. We led the effort to reestablish Amtrak service from Salt Lake to Vegas, and obviously back again. We met all the criteria, but we did not, we didn't rank high enough to get selected. They will not be doing a corridor ID program. I met with the head of FRA just a week and a half ago. They will not be doing a corridor ID solicitation in 2024. They will probably be doing another one in 2025. We're having internal conversations, both with FRA and with UDOT and with Amtrak, in terms of how we can keep progressing this discussion. But yeah, it was never going to be high speed. It was never going to connect to St. George. you know, so it was,
Yeah,
it's
um,
on the existing Union Pacific
My
tracks.
interest in it wasn't so much high speed or that connectivity, it was that a technical complication, you know, got in the way of it. And if I understand it, at least the way the media wrote it up, the technical complication is that Idaho submitted it to the wrong federal department. Am I getting that right?
The wrong, it was the correct department, because
The
it was
wrong
the Department
division.
of Transportation, it was the wrong office within FRA.
Yeah. I just think a huge miss for our state, because I'm speaking from an economic point of view, but that connectivity with Idaho is a huge part of our economic future.
And the governor is very interested in us, you know, keep going at this. We're going to have conversations with Idaho. Should Utah take the lead next time? I mean, these were two independent efforts. I'll tell you what doesn't get reported is the fact that the amount of capital investment would be between $500 and $1 billion per section, and the amount of ongoing money the state would have to put towards each of those services is significant. The state is right now helping pay for intercity bus routes. So we are meeting that need, and it is, you know, and the commission has seen that information with those intercity bus routes, you know, from Salt Lake to Vegas, from Denver to Salt Lake. We have, I think, a very good intercity bus service. We have a contractor that provides it. So it's not like the service doesn't exist. People just like rail more.
For sure.
Okay, the next section we'd like to talk about, it's a little bit about traffic and safety. We're going to just let you look at two different sets of numbers here for both these and the traffic management area, because Troy has some graph data he wants to talk about there. So Troy, I'll just flip through as you're ready.
Any questions on the traffic and safety items? I mean, it looks like we're asking for a small increase on traffic signals, new and rebuild. One thing maybe I should clarify here, when it comes to traffic signals, we have two divisions. Our traffic management division, we do the maintenance and operations for the traffic signals, and we have in our traffic and safety division, they'll do the warranting and then the rebuilds when it comes to traffic signals. So there's a little overlap between the two agencies. There are two groups within, or two divisions within our group. So then they work together to make sure we have a robust traffic signal system.
Commission.
Would
Jim?
the behavioral be where we're putting those things, the one-way driver or the wrong-way driver stuff?
So the behavioral stuff is our safe routes to Utah, our zero fatalities, things like Operation Lifesaver. So any of our outreach that we do would fall into that behavioral safety stuff.
Most of the wrong-way driver probably comes out of the HSIP and some of the other funds that are there.
Yep.
And that HSIP that's labeled up on there, that highway safety program Troy mentioned earlier, it's federally funded. That's
Okay.
why his one area has 2027 funds compared to the others are all state. All right, well,
I see that you're putting up some better lights on some intersections throughout the system where we have the left turn and we're now putting double signals up on the side. I'm sure that's an expense to us, but I'd just like to compliment. It's sure taking the confusion away from the driving public, and I think we'll reap some safety benefits there. We have a couple of intersections I'm thinking of right there by the high school in Uena County, and I've seen a decrease in near misses there as I drive that every day. So just to let you know it's working.
Good to know.
thank you. So Troy's other side of this then is the traffic management, and there are a few slight changes here. So do you want to address those, Troy?
Maybe I can talk real quick about the traffic management vision. You'll see some cost increases, the requests here. Most of that's going to be based on inflationary cost of materials and people, labor to do the work. So small increases, but one of the things we're seeing is about a 6% to 7% increase in the number of devices, whether it be ITS or signals per year that we add to the system, and the cost to maintain those is going up as well. The one thing about, like I mentioned earlier, that the traffic signal costs are going, or to combine, and I'll have a graph here on the next slide that we can talk about the condition of our signals. We've tried to model the traffic signal condition after graphs you typically would see as it relates to pavement or structures. Our goal in the traffic signal world is to have less than 5% in the poor condition. One of the things that, as you look at the age of our system, anything that would be classified more than 41 years typically would get a poor rating. We don't have a lot on there. I don't have the specific number of those, but each one of our technicians go out annually to do what we call preventative maintenance. This is a rather subjective effort. They go through and they'll check all the components within a cabinet, look at the signal heads, make sure everything's functioning, and then they'll put a score on that. And you can see that that fluctuates from year to year, and that based on how much we're able to do in rebuilds on our older system is really contributing to that poor condition on our system. Any questions on that? Then the last graph I have here is on our ITS devices. One thing I might mention, and we have well over 2,000 devices on our system as it relates to ITS devices, everything from cameras to sensors to HAR, VMSs. VMSs are variable message signs on our freeways. And so we need, there's a lot of maintaining to keep those things functioning. Currently, we saw an increase last year from, if you look at this graph, we want to maintain 95% or better in having those devices communicating. We saw a big increase from 22 to 23. This was due to the increased funding that we received last year, as well as we were able to fill a bunch of vacancies that we had in our ITS division, and were able to get out and replace devices that were old and not functioning. And so our current, as of last year, we were about 98% of our ITS devices communicating. One thing I would like to add on our traffic signals, we have a 99% connection to our fiber system. Was probably an envy of the nation in terms of how we communicate with our signals. I say 99, but really it's 100. But every once in a while we'll have a construction project that takes one down while they rebuild it. So we stay at 99. But one other thing I like to is commend us is that our work with our local governments. We're able to connect their signals to our system as well. We have about a 90% connection statewide with all signals.
Did you say it was cities? I didn't
Yes,
hear that.
local. Yeah, sorry, with our cities. Yes.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah, I don't know if,
You mentioned
do we have Taylor here?
No.
But, yeah, no other scene in the country. This is truly unique with the fiber system that we have. We're on the same software, same hardware, same fiber system. I think it's 95% of every signal in the state, whether it be state, city, or county, is on the same signal system. So when people say, I wish they'd coordinate these lights, they are coordinated. No other state is able to have the cities and the counties all on the same system like we have.
That's great. You had mentioned that at the...
Any other questions about the signals and ITS device? Yeah. All right, great. Well, we're cruising right along now then. We'll jump into the next section. I think Commissioner Zanotti asked about the contingency in that. These are all the additional state programs. So if you look at the different funds that's there, we have the contingency we talked about that goes to the regions, to the directors at their discretion, and then they report in May. They've been giving a report about what they spend that money on. For those of you that have been here before, they give that report each May on major areas there where that money was spent. Planning studies, I'm going to have Tiffany address a slide here in a second that has where that money's going, and as well as the public communication and concept development, and I'll have Ben just address the public communication item and why it says 0. So maybe we start there with you, Ben, and then we'll jump to Tiffany's slide.
So yeah, this public communication item, this historically was a commission program. And it was, I don't know, when it was initially stood up, it was pretty related to on-the-road projects. And then over, as we evolved as an agency and became, I don't know, more service, or more public service oriented and trying to get that word out, it has evolved over the years, and it became clear that this is probably a better fit for in a different line item we call it on the org side of the budget, and not through a commission program. So
We felt it was appropriate for the legislature to make a decision of whether or not this should be something that's ongoing. Because statute says the commission programs projects. And this originally started as a project, related to projects. It grew, and it grew in importance, became much broader. So we took it to the legislature, gave them the decision authority on that.
So it was approved at this last legislative session as a line item transfer. So we do have the historic value in there. It's zeroed out, so this will be the last year that you'll see that category. But we did add a couple categories, so we're net zero here probably.
And then the planning studies group, this is us working with the MPOs on a more detailed scale, other than the larger kind of statewide transportation planning that we do, kind of targeted in our transportation solutions group.
Quick question here. I saw the Power District Planning Study in the earlier slide. It's just because it's in a different bucket.
Yeah, that was a RFA. They funded that with general fund. And it's coming to us, but we'll pass that through to Wasatch Front to manage.
Yeah.
And so that's the ballpark area.
Yeah. Carlos, if I wanted to get my head around what percent of UDOT's ongoing budget is going to planning, where would that look? The reason is I saw this number and I was dumbfounded because it's so low. But it's because I'm only looking at a little bucket.
Yeah,
But when
it's-
you've got $62 billion in assets and $3 billion in spending annually, certainly we're putting more into planning.
Yeah, you're looking at a very small bucket, and you're also looking at what are one-time expenditures right here that we're asking the commission to fund. If we go
Does
back.
the commission prioritize planning studies?
On these, I don't think the commission prioritized these. You program into buckets, right?
Yeah, like the 465,000, that's for UDOT Solutions Development Studies. We've brought to the commission some like lists of potential studies, and then we usually try to do a report back periodically on the types of things we're looking at. But that specific amount of money is a little bit more of a programmatic, so it gives flexibility to the planning group to determine that.
Let's
So,
just say, go ahead.
All I was just going to say is maybe I can throw a level of difficulty here. Tiffany and Nate, can we go back to Shara's slide that showed the different line items within the transportation fund? It's probably about 50 slides back, but go ahead.
Oh, I was
And
just going to say that one of the things I value as a commissioner, and I think my colleagues would say this too, is that when I ask Rob, how can I help most, he says, tell me what you're seeing. Be the eyes,
Yep,
out
absolutely.
there. And so, you're on 7th East and you see something that's really doesn't seem right, and you comment on it. And I've noticed at times that Rob is able to take my comments and redirect something within the division. And I don't know where that comes in
So,
there, where
yeah.
there's that discretion, but I think it's a really valuable thing because that's what you're asking us to do.
Yeah, and where you see places where we should do a study, you mentioned one earlier, that's what we really need the commission to help us with, is those things. So this planning, and I would have to get down into what we call program levels within these different line items. But if you think about where is the money for planning coming from, well, you've got engineering services. There's a portion, so that funds a lot of the people that are in Tiffany's area that are doing the statewide planning. It sits in there. Region management, the 39 million. So when you call Robert and you say, I need you to look at something, he's got staff that are being paid out of that line item to help do that. And so that's really kind of that ongoing operational piece. The asset management stuff, all the stuff Nathan talked about and Carmen talked about, that's all built within engineering services and in region management, and Troy's stuff was in operations. So all the traffic operations stuff, all of that ongoing technical expertise to do that planning is built in there. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah, it does.
mean-
I knew that the 900,000 was just sort of a whiff, but.
That is a whiff. And realizing that, most of the money, you saw, what was it, 110 million we passed through to the MPOs? The MPOs, the MPOs are responsible for all the planning, transportation planning in the state, in the 4 urbanized areas, the MPO areas. And so the federal money that passes through us they use that money to fund their staff and to pay the federal money to fund the staff and also to fund projects that their MPO board selects. We call those local government jobs. So we could probably go through and try to pull out each individual program, but yes, it's a big effort.
And then we talked a little bit earlier about with the federal programs, they have planning as well that's assigned. We call it SPRA and B, but it's planning and research funding. And Ivan, do you know what the total of that is? So there's almost $10 million that the agency expends each year on that portion that's related to projects and asset management and these conditions and everything that we've been showing you about. That money all goes directly to the management of these assets and things like U-Track programs and other efforts we have with the colleges and stuff to advance learning and new ideas and new technologies. Let's see, just give me a second to get back where we were.
You guys getting this?
Brad, if you don't know this, maybe you
Don't tell
better,
us we didn't show it to you.
maybe it's too much.
All right, we're down to the last section that's here. So these are the additional programs. Most of them are federal-related programs. This goes to Commissioner Zanotti's question about the asterisks. So within every one of these, if you were to highlight over them, it'll open and give you all the information related to what these are. Like this is the Transportation Alternatives Fund. So that information's there and it's in the packets for people to look specifically into those details. But they have a specific amount of money that's assigned to them and they have a set of criteria associated. Just for instance, you'll be getting next month, you'll get a new list of project updates for the freight plan. We have a freight plan throughout the state that drives that. You'll get those for the transportation alternatives that we just opened, the same with the carbon reduct and the protect. If you remember the Protect Fund last year when we had you fund money, we funded it on existing projects that qualified for the work that's there. If you have a resiliency improvement plan, which they refer to as a RIP in place as a state, you can get a reduction on the match. And so we have that plan into federal highways right now that they're reviewing for approval. And we anticipate that they will approve it and that'll lower the match amount, which doesn't change the amount of money in the program, but it changes how much of the federal dollars that we can spend in that program so you can apply those state match funds other places. But you'll be seeing that again in May, the list and the prioritized list that meets those criteria. So as well as the NEVI plan that's there, Lyle has come and presented that plan and for the state, and that current plan is in place right now and functioning. It includes grant requests that are out to private entities to run and develop and grow that program that falls within that space for electric charging stations. So these are specified amounts. Those programs that need updates will show up in May with all the various items that are there. Commissioner Zanotti, any other questions on that, or does that answer your question? Any other questions from the commissioner on these? Go ahead.
Just going to point out the workforce development is a new line. It was, we've been funding it every year, but it was kind of rolled into transportation solutions. And Lori has some kind of highlights that we do with that program.
Yeah, thanks. We're going to bring Lori Economy up, and she'll be talking to this in the next slide in relation to this workforce development category.
Thanks, Nate. Hey, everybody. My name is Lori Economy, and I am UDOT Workforce Development Director here. We are asking for some funds to support our workforce development efforts. This is a new initiative because IIJA does allow for workforce development to be funded now, and so we thought we would bring that before the commission and ask for some support for that. I have here some things that we have been doing in the past under this, which is our education assistance here, supporting UDOT employees on their educational efforts if they want education assistance. The professional development listed here, these are all of the big programs I would say we support internally and externally for our workforce development efforts. So we do train our internal workforce, but this also supports our external workforce when they do work for us on our projects. And these are just the big kind of programs there. This also supports student internships. We do have a pretty good internship program. We have our rotational engineer program, which is actually not, what's supported here with this funding is the recruitment of those rotational engineers. Their funding comes from another source internally, state funds. But our other interns are also funded from the federal program.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
So many of us around the table started in the rotation program. So when an engineer graduates, they need to pass a national exam. Had a different name when I graduated, but that might speak to how long ago it was. Now it's called the Fundamental in Engineering. So it's a national exam that they have to pass. Then engineers need to work for 4 years under a licensed engineer and have qualifying experience before they can sit for their professional engineer's exam, which is another national exam. The rotational program was built to give our folks an opportunity to get experience in different areas and figure out where they want to work when they come off that rotation program. But it also gives them, when you sit for the PE exam, you're given a list of questions, and some of the questions are really hard and you don't want to try to answer it, and so you have a better breadth of types of questions you're willing to try to answer. And so that's really been the development program for our engineers in the department. And I'll speak to the internships. That is probably, Lori knows better than me, but I think that's one of the best recruiting tools we have for engineers. You know, I like to say that, you know, people will snicker at me, but when people get to know us, they love us and they want to work here. And this is a way we can get them to get to know us. So this has been a really important part of our maintaining our workforce.
And our goal is to continue to grow that, right, so that we can attract as many interns in as we possibly can, that we can support pretty much. And then these educational outreach, we are out in doing career events and things like that at the high school level, the junior high school level, STEM Fest, you'll see us probably out there. I think it was just last week or so, the esports event at the University of Utah. A couple of them hit the news, and UDOT is out supporting those and trying to attract students into coming to work in engineering overall. So, and those are just the list of events that we've done last year. So these are the things that we were able to do last year, but we're looking for more support to continue this effort. As you look over on the other side, these are everything that could be supported with the funding for our workforce development initiatives, that overall strategic workforce planning. So that's looking out into the future and saying, what do we need to do today to attract the workforce of the future so that they want to come to work for transportation? Honestly, we're not on the radar, and we need to tell everybody what a wonderful job UDOT does and what transportation does. The students don't really know that engineering is an amazing place, and transportation is a cool place to work. So, and then that includes those things under the strategic workforce planning, which is the recruitment, our engagement and skill development, the knowledge management efforts within the department in terms of trying to make sure that people have the right information at the right time to do their jobs. Some career path development. This is also an attraction and retention effort, right, in terms of saying that if you come to work for us at a certain level, that we will help you advance throughout the department. And then, of course, leadership development and succession planning. It's really important that we make sure that we're keeping everybody here and that we pay attention to those retention efforts. So that's pretty much all that I really have for that. Is there any questions that you would have for us about our workforce development efforts?
Looks really comprehensive and needed.
Yes, I think our next step, and Carlos and I have talked a little bit about this, is trying to engage our industry partners in terms of trying to really figure out what their needs are and making sure that we're helping them advance those efforts across the whole transportation industry. So something that I look forward to doing next year. So.
And you'll see it coming up here, but our funding, and this is a great problem to have, but the funding that's coming to the department continues to increase. And part of our effort in workforce development is, yes, within the department, we need to continue to grow and educate and, give folks opportunities in learning, but we also have to help our partners, contractors and consultants. I don't believe we have enough capacity in contractors and consultants to meet the future of our program. And so we need to help our contractors and consultants grow.
Has it slowed down? Are we still losing a lot of employees to our partners like we were in the past? Or have we kind of managed that? Is it still about the same, or has it slowed down a little bit?
It's, you saw our number at 12%.
Yeah.
It's higher than it has historically been. We typically, over the past 20 years have been around 8%. We're hoping to see that come down a little.
I mean, it's a balance, helping the partners, but we also got to keep employees here.
We have to
too.
keep, we have to have what I call core competency. So at the end of the day, the consultants are wonderful. I mean, they're smart, they work hard, but we have to have people that are responsible for paying the bills. And so we need to have people with the core competency to be able to evaluate, is that a fair return for the work that they did? Did it, they're billing me for 10 hours to design that pipe culvert under the road. Does it take 10 hours or does it take 1 hour? You need somebody that has done it to be able to, make that evaluation and approve payment or not. That's that core competency.
Well, paying the bills and also driving the equipment, because, I remember a while, a year or so ago, there were so many openings
Yeah.
that he tried to fill equipment operators and other folks.
We're in better shape now with our equipment operators than we were last year.
That's good. I was just wondering if we'd made inroads on that.
We've been able to provide them with, I'll say, probably the most significant pay increase that they've ever seen.
Okay, thank you.
May I also ask just what kind of coordination we do with, for example, UTA? I mean, on cross-training, or, they're also our partners in so many ways, not just the consultants.
Definitely open to those ideas, as many industry partners as we can have out there. We haven't made that connection just yet, but we are hoping to have an industry conversation on what needs they have as well. So.
And our Trails and Transit Division has some specific things they're doing there at UTA. Josh, do you want to just give a quick, brief update as far as what you're doing on transit?
We're working closely with UTA in the development of capital projects. But as for specific recruiting, we're not taking any action jointly. But I would say that the relationship between the two organizations is growing faster than it ever has.
Thought it was Stellantis.
Maybe.
Okay, so
I agree. Thanks.
Yeah, you'll see that request then is about $800,000 that's on that for the program to fund this program. The last item then is transportation solutions. This is you can look at it two ways. One, this is a portion of the remaining balance to address all those items that we hear about almost every commission meeting, that working with communities and the needs to maintain the highway system and all of the various assets. This has probably the most flexible funding approach. The regions will bring lists in May 4 projects to fill these that are divided into different categories. Some of the different approaches that the commission asked for last year is to look at funding this money broke up into some category choices. We mentioned earlier, like signs. That'll be one of the things that there will be some information for the category on signs and others that are in a particular space. And so you'll see this is that remaining balance. If you'd like to move any of the money around, that's the commissioner's prerogative. This is our recommendation about where we'd suggest you program it. If you move money around, it comes out of this total. Thank you. Yeah, it comes out of the total that's on the bottom there for transportation solutions, right? If you wanted to program more to any one of those assets or those other programs, it'll just change that balance on the transportation solutions line that's set at $84.5 million for this year. Any questions in terms of all of the funding programs? Okay, I think Ben had one item that he wanted to cover, and then we'll end this section.
Yeah, thank you. So I was wondering if we maybe consider a motion to saunter for 10 minutes before we jump into the last portion of our. I think so. Yeah.
Okay, is that okay, Nagi?
Make a motion, yes.
In honor of the legislative session,
Let's-
we had some running jokes here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, Ben likes that. So let's be back at 20 minutes after 11.
check blocks to go through, and it's our capacity program. So just to kind of reorient everybody to where we're at, we talked about kind of the legislative session and some of the highlights related to transportation. We then talked about the number of dollars that we have to protect and to preserve our infrastructure. And now we're going to talk about the money and the recommendations that we have to add capacity. So Shara's going to go through, oops, this is the wrong thing again. Shara's going to go through the dollar amounts that we have for these capacity programs. But I wanted to orient, we're going to be talking about some recommendations for 4 of the
Tiffany,
funding
can I,
accounts.
so I was given an instruction on microphones.
Okay,
We have to speak straight into them
okay.
so that people can hear us. Thank you.
Yeah, so the TIF, T-TIF, CC-TIF, and A-TIF, we will be providing recommendations for today. But in May, you'll be seeing more project level recommendations for our assets, as well as the first, last mile, and A-TIF, T-TIF, TIF active. I always get them mixed up. So here you go, Sharon.
Okay, back. Is this, can you hear me? Okay, I feel quiet, but I will talk directly into it. No? Straight into the mic. I'll hold it right there. Okay, we're going to talk about our Transportation Investment Fund, which is our largest pot of funding. This is over 1.4 billion ongoing, and like Tiffany mentioned, these funds are all capacity programs. This one's focused on highway capacity. The revenue sources coming into the TIF are, the largest proportion is sales tax. So the TIF receives 20.68% of the sales tax, and like has been mentioned a little bit, and we'll go through again, a portion of the sales tax is then transferred out to some of our other TIF funds. This fund also receives vehicle registrations, personal vehicle registrations, and then new this year, and we'll explain this concept in the next 2 slides. But new this year, we are now receiving $330 million ongoing of general funds into the TIF, and we'll explain what that's about. And then we also receive some gas tax into the TIF as well, for a total of just over 1.4 billion of revenue in TIF. The way we use the TIF, we have some debt payments that we are making for the next 8-10 years. And then we transfer out, that orange section transfers out some of the sales tax into our CC-TIF, our T-TIF, new commuter rail account that we'll talk about, and then A-TIF. And then we also have a little smidgen of a COVID era cut that goes back to general fund. But the largest proportion obviously is available for projects. In one-time funding, so this is one-time funding we talked about at the beginning. We received one time of $492 million from general funds into TIF, and this next slide will kind of explain both that and the $330 million ongoing into TIF. So this is language from actually the 2023 general session that set this up, but the idea was that they called it high-risk money, but it was revenue they anticipated getting on forecast but weren't sure if it would really come in. So they wrote this language to say if the revenue comes in as we think it will, in the 2024 general session, which is what we just had, they directed the legislative fiscal analysts to put 1.1 billion from the general fund into to address transportation debt service, meaning go into TIF where we still have our debt payments. So how that shook out between everything that happened this session was they determined to put $492 million one time in fiscal year 2025 from the general fund into TIF, and then on an ongoing basis, $330 million, which over time exceeds that 1.1 billion, but it kind of points back to that 1.1 billion. Did you want to say anything about that?
Well, no, 1.1 billion. But the piece that I think is remarkable is the 330 ongoing. So essentially, TIF was around $1 billion. And we've almost added a third to TIF. And I didn't hear too much about this during the session. It was pretty remarkable.
So while it's for transportation debt, we're not paying off the debt immediately with this. We're still making our debt payments, and this money will essentially add to project funding.
And as Carlos mentioned, that's a lot of additional funds coming into our capacity program, and we are excited to program them and recommend them to you today. I want the two orange, you guys saw this like one of the very first slides, but I wanted to circle back and just point out that we are recommending program levels for our assets, but we also are here to talk to you about some recommendations for certain capacity buckets of funding, which are the TIF, TTIF, ATIF, and CCTIF. So I just wanted to highlight that before we go into the different recommendations for each one of those buckets. Also wanted to take a step back and just also remind everybody that we have a big program going on already, and I can jump into so not only are we got another $1 billion, but we're also working on, what was the total?
More than $7 billion between now and 2030.
So I just wanted to jump in here and show you this tool of all of the other corridors and projects we're working on statewide. And we're adding these capacity projects as well to our program. So lots going on, but we're going to add on to that as well.
And so these are just TIF projects. So between, Ben, what did you say, between 2024 and 2030, the commission has already programmed
Just north of $7 billion worth of currently programmed projects.
That's what we're working on right now. Just in this one program, I think there's about, Carmen, 850 projects that we've got, something like that, that you've already put us to work on.
So that's baseline for us. And now we're looking for recommendations to add some more tools to our arsenal. These are some part of the existing program that we just talked about. Some of those need some extra funding, and we are recommending these four as part of the recommendation so that we can complete the scope as necessary. We also, congratulations, Region 4 got a grant, and we'd like to provide that match so that we can use those federal funds for that project. Yeah.
I just want to take a second to talk about this grant. So a couple cool things about it. So first of all, Region 4 is on a roll with grants, starting with, I think I was asking the Region 4 team, the first one was fairly recently anyway, there was a wildlife grant. And then there was the South Cedar Interchange grant for $70 million, and then this one for $87 million. And those last two, yeah, I mean, a few years ago there was a big one on the SR 162 and 262. But these last two, South Cedar Interchange and the I-15 6 to 8, they were second-time submittals. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to the team, the region team, the central grants team, all the stakeholders and everything, because I think that just shows how they, you know, we submit, we were not successful the first time, we do a debrief, and then we learn from it, and then they go out and take what they learned and resubmit. And I mean, 70 million on the other one, and then 87.6 on this one. I mean, there's a big, I mean, they do cost us a little bit of money to put those applications together, but I think our return on investment's pretty good with a few of these. I think those numbers are looking pretty good. So, so yeah, this one in particular, it's a great complement to the project that was already planned, and now there's some additional money, and this recommendation is related to adding to existing money with adding the grant to it and adding some additional state funding to that project to make it a project that's ready to go here.
Tiffany, I don't know, were you planning? I was wondering if we could ask the region directors, if you pull up the fact sheet and ask the region directors to say a few words on each recommendation here. Putting you on the spot,
Happy to
Rob.
ask the region directors to talk about their projects. Rob, you're up. Okay, Region 1, Rob.
Okay. So this is I-89, US 89 and I-84 interchange project. We've had a little bit of money funded in here for quite a while, well, I say a little bit, $60 million. It wasn't enough to finish the project. We recently did a environmental study here and determined an option that was going to include a bypass for US 89. Most of the traffic goes north-south. And what this funding will allow us to do will allow us to build phase 1 and phase 2 of this particular solution. So that's the Spooey interchange you see down on the lower part of that map, and then also the Union Pacific bridges. That's a bottleneck in that area. You see the two green lines to the north. That funding will allow us to do phase 1 and phase 2 of this project, which will improve the traffic congestion in this area. This is the #1 congestion spot in Region 1 is right here. We're seeing backups of several miles since we completed the 89 project a couple years ago. This interchange can no longer handle that traffic, and so all the signals were taken out, and so now all the traffic waits right here to get through into South Ogden and into Ogden up to Weber State, McCady Hospital. So those are the things that this will fund the phase 1 and phase 2 of this project.
And Rob, the full project, what's your ballpark estimate for cost for the full project?
The full phase of the project will be another $500 million, which includes a bypass for 89 to go all the way through and bypass 84, which most of the traffic takes. So that will be the ultimate fix for this area, is to have that bypass. But right now we're going to concentrate on phase 1 and phase 2, because not only is it going to take care of the traffic, but we have this structure, as we were looking before with Carmen's structures. This one was built about that same time in the 70s, I believe, and it hasn't had a major reconstruction. That includes both the structure at the interchange as well as, you'll notice to the left there, the one over the Weber River, which is, if you've driven through there lately, you know that that's getting pretty tired, and we need some major TLC on it. So anyway, that's 89, 84.
I had a question on that.
Yeah.
So will that eventually, when it's all done, you know, where some of the loops, and you dump right into the traffic, is that going to have more like an extra lane that'll have a chance to merge in, or will it continue to dump right into the, you know, like some interchanges, you have a little bit of a ingress lane and then it merges in?
Yeah, that merge is out. That's one of the safety issues that we're going to be addressing with this. That merge, if you're headed westbound, you got to look really carefully when you're merging on there, because there's not a very long merge length.
So that'll actually eventually address that.
That will be taken care of with this first phase. So
thank you.
Let's go to the next one. Roberto.
My favorite roadway, Bangor Highway. So the original project, or this project was originally funded prior to the environmental document being completed. That environmental document, has the ROD been issued? I'm looking at you because you signed those things, but yes. Okay, yes, so officially signed. So we now have our scope locked in for this project. The original scope is to go from 41st to California Avenue. This additional funding will allow us to get from 41st to 31st, so not all the way to California Avenue. The total project cost for this is estimated at $1.7 billion right now to get all the way to California Avenue. But this gives us a logical section to build, and also as part of the environmental process, right, we go out and we tell people, hey, there's a chance that we have to take part of your property. This section from 41st to 31st takes care of almost all of those residential relocations. So rather than allowing some of those residents to hang in limbo about what's going on with their property, this project allows us to go and buy all of that right-of-way necessary. And I think it's something like 95% of all residential relocations are in this section. Does that make sense? It also fits the logical sequencing to go from south to north on Bangor Highway, so it fits within that.
When you get to California, that will complete the grade, taking the at-grade intersections and making this grade separated.
Yeah, and just as you look within our system in the Salt Lake Valley, Bangor Highway being a fully grade separated freeway essentially is a big deal, right? It connects all the way from south from I-15 all the way up to the airport as a grade separated freeway. That's a major solution that we desperately need. That freeway alternative to I-15 is something desperate for us.
Thank you. Natalie?
It's just a thought I had, and it's really probably premature, but Carlos, do you expect there to be some projects that are advanced because of the Olympic Winter Games?
Yeah, that's good question. And so, we expect by the summer to be awarded the games when that decision will be made. And then at that point, Natalie, you and I were around the last time we did this, there'll be an Olympic organizing committee stood up. And that Olympic organizing committee will really be the entity that will put together the transportation plan needed to get to each of the events. I did sit down, some of our team sat down with, it's a very skeleton staff of the folks that are putting together the bid right now. There's one paid person as part of this effort. And so we think that in terms of the Olympics, the double tracking of front runner is going to be one of the critical pieces. And the reconstruction of the interchange up at Kimball's, so 224, that entrance into Park City. We're in the environmental document on that. Robert's team is working on that. That will be probably the two most critical infrastructure pieces. But there's going to be, we're not going to be using the same venues as before, and there's more events than there was before. And so it's going to necessitate moving people in and out of venues more than we had to during 2002. So we don't yet know the plan, but we know that those two pieces, also the Heber Valley bypass is another one that has been identified by that small group of people as something that's probably critical for the infrastructure that accesses Soldier Hollow for the Nordic events.
Love your response, and just stay tuned, right? 'Cause
Stay tuned.
There's
We're
going to be more and more
be,
talk about this.
10 years sounds like a long time. Probably won't end up being. Robert, anything else on this project?
Nope, we're just excited for it.
Excited. I love that. Okay, 2100 North, you already have 279 million as a commission program to this. Rob?
Right. This is the segment that goes west from I-15. This was constructed as frontage roads as they exist today, with the plan to fill in the freeway cross-section at a future date, and this project would do that. The original amount funded, $395. Some of that we're spending, you approved to spend on the Mountain View Corridor project that's extending north from where it ends today at Redwood Road, because those elements in that project would also be included in 2100 North. We're just delivering them earlier. This project is another critical piece of infrastructure that will provide a benefit. There's a lot of development happening in Lehigh and beyond Lehigh, and right now on 2100 North we have regional traffic mixed with local traffic, and it's really causing a lot of congestion. And having the freeway to separate the regional traffic from the local traffic that can use the frontage roads, I think will be a really nice benefit and improve mobility there, and tying into the continuity that will exist on Mountain View Corridor will also be an effective connection that's made.
Yeah, we're really
So-
kind of completing the system. It'll be a system-to-system interchange with I-15.
Right.
So no stops lights
Right.
there.
So the additional 275 will allow us to build all of the ramps, flyover connections at I-15. I mentioned earlier, we're building the connections at Redwood Road as part of the Mountain View Corridor Project. And then in addition, this will also provide 3 lanes in each direction on 2100 North on the freeway.
Can we see the schedule there at the bottom? Is that part? Oops. Yeah, design, construction. After the tremendous success of the West Davis corridor, you know, people do appreciate this, and if they know it, this was, I think, Carlos's comment the other day, and kind of Governor Levitt, when they know what the outcome's going to be, they'll be patient and they'll live with it. This is a really big deal. I'm talking to you who live there, but it's a really big deal for our state in so many ways. The end date is unknown at this time. That's probably a fair statement.
When the teams are, you know, figuring out, when Ben's team and Tiffany and Shara, they're all figuring out the cash flow. These guys have given them anticipated construction timeframes. So they do have an idea of when it would be, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done because we're not even, you know, we haven't finished design. We're not in procurement yet.
Yeah.
So, but they've probably, I'm going to guess, Robbie, did 2 to 3 years for construction for this.
2.
2? I like that. Maybe 1?
We're actually putting out the procurement for our program manager today, I believe, for this project. So.
Okay, good.
For the corridor preservation crew, Commissioner Menlo and Diana.
Well, the nice thing is, you already got the land right in the middle between the 2 frontage roads, so that's one good thing. We're ready to go.
That's planning ahead.
Okay, so this is the I-15 milepost 6 to 8 project, and before I talk about the project, I too just have to give credit where credit's due to our central planning group. Awesome job, our region staff, our region planner, that for this grant, this $87 million grant, there was 149 letters of support. It was amazing. And these connections for this grant came through the environmental process. I mean, so it was all part of the process, and then we were able to jump on this, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect. So we're really grateful for this. The main project as it started out was to widen I-15 to 3 lanes, included 2 structures, the one at 700 South and one at 100 South. The 700 South is going to be designed to accommodate a possible future interchange as the traffic demands. And during the process, they also noticed that if we were able to connect this community, which I-15, with our topography down there, with our mesas, and our I-15 basically dissects this community, and these looked like logical places for these connections that made a lot of sense. And I was down there talking with the local officials down there, and just kind of an example of what this will do from like emergency response time. They said that it will save over 2 minutes of emergency response time to get from the fire department to that area of town. That is amazing. So, so that will include 2 underpasses, one at 400 East. I always have to see if it's west or east, but east, and 900 South. This was like being at Disneyland when I got this news, so it was awesome.
So the grant was a Connecting Communities grant, and so the effort that USDOT is trying to do here is they're recognizing that, you know, a lot of times our focus was just on getting from point A to point B, and we built roads over the last 100 years that bifurcated communities. And so the intent of this grant was find ways to create those connections, reestablish the connections. And so it really works well with this project. And I think some of the things that Kurt's team heard during the environmental process was that need for that connection. So,
yeah. And just to note, you know, the additional TIF funding would be required regardless of the grant. The grant included the price to elevate I-15 in that area and the underpasses. The $38 million was part of a request that we would have been asking anyhow.
So that is the recommendation for our existing projects that need additional funding. Any other questions on our existing program before we start adding more? Wanted to step back and just go over, we put together a statewide transportation plan. We then, based off of fiscally constrained needs, prioritize the projects related to our different buckets of money. And before we jump into showing you what our recommendations are for for TIF, we just wanted to point out that the reason being is because we did this prioritization process, and it's built on the backbone of our vision, which was to improve quality of life through transportation and those 4 outcomes. I'm only pulling this up so that if you do want to go and look at the list in the future, you can. And you'll notice that the ones that are ranking fairly high on the needs are going to look very similar, because they're the ones that we are recommending that we add to our program based off of the funding that Shara went over. And I can jump into these as well if that's something that we want to go through with this list as well. I'm phoning my region director friends on how you want to talk about this list, and you're probably the biggest one.
Do you want us to talk through these projects?
Yes, I would like you to explain why they're important, Rob.
Okay. Do you want me to go first?
It is a little bit of a Rob show,
Yeah.
so don't rub it in anyone's face.
All right.
After the last 40
And Rob, I can pull up that one pager again if that helps you.
Yeah,
Can you
let's
click
do
the
that.
escape? This kind of looked like the area that you're going to be talking about, right?
Oh, okay. Are those links active in the? Okay, so the first project is Pioneer Crossing. This is a parallel facility to 2100 North in that northwest Utah County area, and this project carries a tremendous amount of traffic. We measured it recently, and we're at about 60% over capacity on this road. Yeah, and I mean, so 60% more than 100%. So, the road was full, and then we continued to add people to it. It just means that the road is busier for more of the day than an average road. And so it's indicative of all the growth that's happened out there. And we desperately need a capacity solution on that facility. The long-range plan has a project to expand the road to add lanes in each direction. And the concept here is to take advantage of the directional nature of the traffic and to apply the flex lanes concept that's in place here in the Salt Lake Valley. If you've driven, what's the address of it? 5400 South. The lane configuration and the having 4 lanes in the peak direction versus 2 lanes in the off-peak direction matches perfectly with the demand that exists out there. So we still need to go through the design process and verify, work through the details, but that project will be a really good interim solution as we continue to find creative ways to deal with all the growth that's happening out there.
So Rob, if I could say, so in the first phase, correct me where I'm wrong here, the first phase of the long-range plan that MAG had, it had the expansion of an extra lane in each direction.
That's right.
And when we did the analysis, it would still fail with an extra lane in each direction. And so we're looking for ways to make that alternative that was in the long-range plan function better, and that's where the reversible came around.
Because we really, we need more than 1 lane
Yes.
added in the peak direction.
In the peak direction.
We needed 2, and this would allow us to meet that demand.
and Lenise can correct me, but the full freeway for this section is in third phase? Or is it unfunded? Sorry to put you on the spot. I do that all the time to our folks. I'm going to do it to the MPOs too. It's phase 2. And so the long-range vision is, this is going to buy us, Rob, I don't know, 10 years? 9 years?
We're thinking about 10 years.
10 years, but the ultimate plan is this needs to be a freeway the way 2100 North is going to be a freeway.
And as you know, there's discussions, is it this, is it south of that, and that's all part of that whole environmental talk.
Okay. Mountain View Corridor, Corey Ride. Oops. Doesn't exist. Okay, so.
Didn't
Oh,
like
good.
those answers.
It works. Okay, so this would convert State Route 73 to a freeway. And it's the first segment. There's 2 segments identified in the long-range plan. This would be the first segment from where the existing Mountain View corridor ends out to Ranches Parkway. And the second segment would take it out to Eagle Mountain Boulevard, not contemplated in this project. And then the commission has also talked about the preservation of corridor for the freeway extending down through the Cedar Valley. And that's the context of this project. So this is another segment of our network that's over capacity and congested. The development that continues to happen in western Saratoga Springs and in Eagle Mountain is not stopping. And on any given day, you can see that the congestion that happens, because this road necks down to 2 lanes or 1 lane in each direction. It's a 2-lane road eventually.
And so you can picture building 2100 North as a freeway. We're building Mountain View Corridor coming from this north as a freeway. Pioneer Crossing now with 4 lanes instead of 2 lanes going during the peak direction, all dumping into 1 lane, going 1 direction. And the commission, you have, in your corridor preservation efforts, you've been buying a lot of property along SR 73 here for a while. This is always meant to be a freeway out here.
And
it's not getting any cheaper.
Rob, eventually where you see the end of that and those kind of 2 pieces now, that will also be freeway eventually in the middle of there, right?
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, there's more, and it goes south too, along Foothill.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, this project is already cleared environmentally, and like Carlos said, we've acquired much of the right-of-way already, so.
I know we had a hiccup with the one-pager for that previous project, but maybe jump back to that list, and then we could jump back to this one-pager, and you can speak to that other project, because it does tie right into there, so. Yeah, that Mountain View corridor piece to the north, correct? Is that,
Yeah.
that's what the other project is, so maybe you could speak to it off of this one-pager.
Okay, yeah, okay, so you can see where the 2 lines are separated north of this project. That's the existing portion of Mountain View corridor that we have constructed. Those are the frontage roads, and they would get filled in with the freeway cross-section. That is the other project that we can't get the link to work, but that will be a critical connection, especially as the growth continues to happen, because you'll have freeways on either end of that, and right now that's an at-grade facility with signals, so or will be shortly. So we need to increase the capacity of that section, or else we'll have a bottleneck there.
Maybe Rob, do the last Region 3, that passing lane segment there in
Oh, right.
Santa Quinta Payson. Yeah.
You want me to talk, well, okay, so as I understand it, Lisa was having discussions with folks up at the legislative session with Carlos and the team, And the desire was, we're seeing more and more regional traffic associated with weekends and holidays, and it's exposing portions of our rural freeway system, the vulnerability that we have to some of those crushes in traffic volume. And she asked us to identify key segments of the freeway in our rural area where we could spend some strategic money, limited dollar amounts that would have the most benefit. And we identified 2 segments in the Santaquin area that have existing lane drops associated with them where we see congestion related to those weekend and holiday travels. So these 2 projects totaling 18 million would extend existing passing lanes and make the existing passing lanes that are out there a little bit more functional and get people past the high demand traffic points. So.
Yeah, I will say that, the approach that we're taking here is an incremental approach similar to what we did on US 6 starting in 2001, where we had done an environmental, we identified over $1 billion to widen US 6 between Spanish Fork and I-70 to a 4-lane facility, and we're like, there's no way we can find that money for that facility. So we're going to just go at it piece by piece. We're going to build passing lanes and just keep going at it. And we recognize that I-15 probably from Brigham City to, or maybe even Tremont and all the way down to St. George needs to have at least 3 lanes in each direction. And so this is that approach of just sticking to it and getting to it.
Okay, this next segment is passing lane on I-15. This section of I-15 has the most truck percentage of any section in the entire state for I-15. And so one of the challenges that we see here is that when you have a lot of trucks, you have one truck trying to pass the other one, and then you get a whole line of cars behind that. And I see that on I-15 throughout the state in different areas at different times of the day. And so what we're doing here is adding a passing lane for the ability for those car queues to get around the trucks. And what we're going to do is widen to the middle. The trucks are going to be able to stay in the outside lanes, and the passenger cars and other vehicles, light vehicles, are going to be able to get in. So this is a 3-mile passing lane section between SR 13, so that north Brigham City exit that goes to Corinne, for those that are familiar with that, and then Honeyville, the metropolis of Honeyville is the kind of the north end of that. That's it's going to fit in between there and give an opportunity for folks to get around the trucks in this area and help move traffic.
So this continues further north to where I-84 and I-15 split. So this is not the end of the story, because those trucks do continue on and then go in either into Idaho on I-15 or into Idaho on I-84. And this is a high priority. It's just an incremental part of it, and we're hoping it will continue. Thank you.
Okay, so for the project down in Region 4, we're looking at the southbound passing lane from milepost 16 to 20.2. So those that are familiar with this, as you drop off the Black Ridge, you come down to where Harrisburg is, and you have Quail Creek Reservoir, and then this is that climb out of there. This is a great operational improvement. This is where you have the truck going 55 that's passing the one going 54. And we have the 2 lanes. We see a lot of backup there. But it also ties into an existing 3-lane section at exit 16. Of all the ones that we have many needs down there, but this would be probably the greatest operational one for us at this time.
You're talking about the holidays and weekend. This is the place.
This is the place, but that is the place.
This is the right place.
That's right. If we don't talk about passing lanes in Washington County at a commission meeting, it's not a normal commission.
It's not the right.
It's not the right place. Congratulations on that growth. It's just incredible.
So again, just to recap, we have a list of existing projects we'd like to add some additional funding to, as well as this list of new capacity projects for TIF. Any other questions before we move into TTIF?
Okay, back to our big ongoing pie. We're going to talk about the Transit Transportation Investment Fund, which is our smaller yellow slice right there. This receives funding, sales tax funding transferred out of TIF into TTIF. And then new this year, there was created a commuter rail sub-account within TTIF. So this is account focused just on commuter rail. And then we also received just a little bit of funding, $366,000 from the rail restricted account to use for rail crossing safety grants. The way we utilize the funding in TTIF, for FY25, there will be about $32 million available for transit projects. There was a legislatively directed project for Sharp-Tintic Railroad realignment for $16 million. And then the full amount of $44.7 million available for commuter rail projects. And then those rail crossing safety grants. And then we do transfer a little bit of funding to the transportation fund to staff the group that handles Josh's group for transit. So for 25, that's about $96 million that we have in this fund. So for that Sharp-Tintic Railroad realignment project, this was designated in HB 3, and it's a railroad realignment project in Utah County.
So yeah, the Sharp-Tintic project was something that was legislated, but we also have a couple of recommendations for TTIF. Again, I'm going to draw on our ranked lists and show you the reasoning behind our recommendations. And there will be two, and I wanted to just pull up that with this bucket of money, there is a nomination process where that kind of gives us the signal of the different transit districts' priorities, because they are then kind of letting us know that they have the match and that it's a priority project for them. So I pulled this up because we did program one of the nominated projects, and what we'd like to do today for recommendation is to recommend the other two nominated TTIF projects. And if I say the wrong words, Ben's here to kick me under the table. So these are the two other projects that were nominated during the nomination window, and we'd like to recommend those to be funded and move forward in TTIF.
Any questions on those projects? Okay.
I'm going to phone a friend for Ben on this one.
So this is related to that newly created TTIF commuter rail sub-account, this recommendation. A little bit of the history on this project. Front runner station at Point of the Mountain and associated double tracking. So this is a new station on Front Runner, the Point of the Mountain area. To put a new station in, it requires some additional double tracking along that system to make the transit meets work. Last legislative session, there was some general fund money appropriated, $200 million. The current project estimate is $400 million, so there was, given that money from last year, there was still an additional need. So the recommendation here is to use that amount, is to program the rest out of that commuter rail sub-account to make that project whole according to the current estimate.
That's obviously a lot of money, but big need. What's the double tracking? How much double tracking will that cover? Ben, I mean, just curious.
I'm sorry.
I'm just asking,
Commissioner,
how much double tracking will be covered by that kind of
Josh,
project?
this is your answer.
I don't have the exact number at hand, but there are 4 additional sections that need to be double tracked, primarily around stations. Basically, so the 15-minute service that's promised under Frontrunner 2X can basically continue once the new station is in. But let me phone a friend to see exact.
When you say 4 sections, that's not a technical term. That just means 4 areas.
For different locations at which there'll be additional double tracking. See, this all works, again, this is the same thing as the I-15 project. Eventually, the entire system has to be double tracked.
Right, yeah.
And some would even say quad tracks in places, be able to get to the service we need. But we're working towards that ultimate vision with UTA is double tracking the entire system, electrifying the entire system, grade separating the system throughout the whole thing. And that will help us get that service, because as our state continues to grow, we're not going to meet it just with, roads. We need to have transit be a viable alternative. And so the Point of the Mountain Station adds a little bit more complications in terms of where the trains meet and the operational, sequencing of how you operate it.
Yeah.
And so this additional double tracking makes that station work, but it also helps move us towards that ultimate vision.
And the ultimate vision is how much of the Wasatch Front is covered by?
Complete section of Wasatch Front covered by double tracking at least.
Yeah.
And it's electrified, because the electrification will allow us, not only is it cleaner for the air, but it will allow us to do the start and stops much faster.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so that really helps give us more operational flexibility, and it'll help improve reliability as well.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. I heard some pushback by some of the local municipal officials saying that they had not been kept fully in the picture what was happening. And obviously, there's probably 4 or 5 sides to that, but I hope that we're, in fact, building consent among the municipal folks that have to live with this.
Yeah, I mean, between UTA and UDOT, we're working as a team, working with the communities on this. So this is something that's important for this at a state level.
It's a really big deal.
Yep.
It's a really big deal.
Okay, moving on to our Cottonwood Canyons Transportation Investment Fund. So this, as Carlos mentioned earlier, this is not a fund that is programmed by the commission, but there were some funding changes this year, so we just wanted to make you aware of it. It is a smaller proportion of our overall funding. So when this was started a couple years ago, maybe 2021, it was funded through sales tax from TIF, but it was capped at $20 million, as Leif mentioned earlier. This session, it was adjusted to take 0.44% of the 20.68% of sales tax that goes into TIF and transfer that into the CC TIF. So that is projected to be just under a hair of $20 million in '25, but it will grow as sales tax grows. Also new this year, there was an ongoing appropriation made out of this fund to transfer $400,000 a year back into the transportation fund for public safety in the Cottonwood Canyons. And then our last of the TIFs is our Active Transportation Investment Fund, also a smaller overall proportion of our funding. But this, if you may remember, was a new fund created last session. There's ongoing sales tax that is transferred from TIF into this ATIF, and a little over $900,000 of that funding is then transferred to the Transportation Fund for staffing of the active transportation projects. So there's just about $44 million available for projects. And then because this was created last year, it had funding from last year that was accumulating. So there was about $45 million in ongoing funding, less some legislatively directed pass-through, plus a one-time infusion of $45 million, plus what we'll be getting in '25. So the balance as of '25 will be about $118 million, which just lines up what they will be recommending.
Then we're gonna have Stephanie come and,
Woohoo! Last item, trails. Okay. I'm just making sure we're all still awake. Okay. So first, kind of direct your attention to the left side of the screen here. So I wanted to give two quick wow, this is so, yeah, sorry. Two quick updates related to the program thus far. And then this is one of the programs that we are making, initial programming recommendations today. It's just for information only, and then at future commission meetings we'll come back to get those approved. But just a quick couple of updates. In February, we came with our ranked list, you may recall. So quick reminder, we have to use the TIF active prioritization model called out in statute for the ATIF or the UTN funding. So we did, we worked through a bunch of engagement this past fall, and we came up with a list of projects, of which we put 43 of those through the prioritization model. So since you saw that list last, in February, we have added 2 projects to the list and taken one off. That has to do with one of the projects is already funded through a bigger roadway project, and then we added 2 projects, one in Cache Metropolitan Planning Organization, so that MPO area, and then the Bear Lake project up in Rich County. It was further along kind of in the design process than we had originally anticipated, so it met our criteria to be considered for this initial funding consideration. The other item that I wanted to update on is that the Trails Division, with support of the Central Grant Division and then Region 4, we did submit a RAISE grant through the FHWA. It's a $12 million grant request, so that would be a $2.4 million match from UDOT if we ended up getting that. We don't know yet if we received that, but it's a super exciting submission. It's down in the Four Corners region of the state, so a trail kind of in the Monticello, Bluff, Blanding, Montezuma Creek area. So we'll obviously update you more on that if we end up getting that grant, but we just wanted to make you aware. Okay, so for today, as I mentioned, we'll be doing initial programming recommendations for our first 2-year work program within the Trails Division. Super exciting. And then in May, as I mentioned, we will request approval of those final recommendations. So now kind of on the right side of the screen, because the next slide shows the list, but I wanted to point out kind of where we've come, right? Initially, when we did our outreach this past fall, we ended up with a list of 160 trail projects that were brought up that were kind of somewhere along the feasibility and design process. This is awesome. This means a lot of the communities across our state are doing a lot of trail planning. So we took that list and we had to kind of whittle it down to 43 projects that were in alignment with our initial programming recommendation. So this we talked about at the last meeting, but it had a transportation emphasis. It had some level of design work completed, and there was outreach there was a strong amount of community support for this specific project. In looking at that list, we had basically too many projects than we have funding for in this initial programming round. So we had to further refine, so down to 21 projects that fit within our program budget, and then pass future, like the further screening that we had to do. A quick note, all this information is on our website, so utahtrailnetwork.udot.gov, so you can see all of the lists there. But excitingly, this is what's there on that list. So we have like I said, 21 projects that we're making initial programming recommendations for. So to orient you to this chart a bit, starting from the left, that is the project rank. That's the project's rank on the prioritization model, right? So you can see we kind of bounced around our ranked list. Next, we have the project name. This gets into some details about the location of the project, but then also if there was a certain segment of the project that we're recommending for programming versus the entire extent, we call that out here. An example of that would be row 14, Steinecker Service Canal Trail, phase 1, right? We're recommending the first phase as opposed to the entire trail. Next, you have the county that it falls within, the UDOT region, the MPO area, and then I do want to point out, because this is important, the project funding type. So you see two different options here: construction ready or planning and environmental evaluation. So you're probably starting to see the amounts look really different depending on whether it's in that category, whether it's in construction ready or planning and environmental. So what we found in all the outreach that we've been doing since the February meeting is that there's some projects that they have aspects of them that are construction ready, but then there's maybe some of these big components that still need to be addressed, like an environmental that we'd need to go through. So we basically said, hey, let's program this for some funding, but let's get that kind of planning feasibility work under our belt, and then see if we decide that the project can move forward into construction. So that's why those projects are calling out at around 300,000 versus millions, is because they're for a study. And then last but not, or the next two columns, so the initial programming recommendations. So this is us, or this is the amounts that we've come forward with that seem reasonable based on the cost estimating that we did. And as a reminder, you approved at the February commission meeting, we've had a consultant on board to help us evaluate the costs. So we've been going through each one of these with a pretty fine-tooth comb. And then project links. So yeah, we're looking at around 90 million in programming recommendations and about 63 miles of trail facilities. I just wanted to give a quick stats on this, because this would be the first time we're making these recommendations. So this is by regions. So we're recommending, again, the 60 or $90 million in funding. And you can see by each region kind of the statistics. I think it's really exciting to note, like, we're recommending 14 unique counties for projects. We have, again, the mileage broken up by regions, and then calling out the number of feasibility or environmental projects versus construction ready. So with that, I can show you really quick just on. Go back.
Stephanie, sorry.
No, you're good.
So that adds up to 20, and you said 21. The total project.
Am I missing one? Oh, goodness, I'm missing one. Good. Good. Oh, sorry, yeah, thank you. It's because we had two feasibility studies. They're in the same area, so it's the Fossum Spur and 248. So what we're gonna do, there's a trail basically where it connects together, and then it would potentially cross over 248. We're gonna join that and probably do one feasibility study, but it's called out right now as two, so, yeah. Thank you. Phone a friend over there. Fast math too, yeah. So this just, when you go to the website, if you go to the home, you'll see up here, just to make it really easy to get to that initial programming. But you'll see here we have a little narrative about how we got here. This is that exact same chart that I just showed. So you're welcome to go through it, take a look. We also have our ranked list here. So on this list, you'll see those two or the three project changes that I mentioned. So the addition of 2 projects in Region 1, and then the removal of 1 in Region 2. So this is an updated ranked list. And then this is a cool, the map we made sure to update showing, you can see the full project extent, right, of like a tier 1 project is called out, but then the extent that's in with this little highlighted pink, that's the actual extent for this initial programming, right, that we're recommending. So pink is the construction ready, and then the orange here are those are the projects for further evaluation. So I think, I want to just reiterate, like, this is brand new, so if you have any questions or you want to meet with the team to talk about any of these projects more, we're totally open to that and would love to meet and discuss any of these projects, because our initial plan right now is to come back in May and ask for approval of these funding recommendations. We anticipate the things that might change between now and May is we're further refining those costs. And if as they come in, we think they might, they're more or less, a project might be able to get added or a project might come off. So we'll, of course, let you know that if that happens. But any questions about trails? Yes.
I just want to compliment you and your team for such a fast track, pun intended. You just got this assignment yesterday almost, and you already have this much progress in the system. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. It's exciting that there was so much work already done. We really capitalized on the work that's already happening. Okay.
Well, congratulations as well. I know this is something the governor is very, very focused on as well and appreciate it. How many are on the team altogether that you've got in-house? Are we looking at the two?
So it's Josh, raise your hand, and then Eric. So Eric Buell, we introduced him a couple commission meetings ago. He's the program manager. He's really in charge of all the money, and he does it really well. So, but that's all right now. So we also have a lot of consultant support, but yeah, yep.
I mean,
and you all have nice suntans. That's a good sign.
Spend some time outside. Okay.
So Commissioner, both the divisions under Josh here, the trails and the transit, are a work in progress. We're standing them up at, trying to bring people on in a, I'll say, systematic way, because they started running before they were even on the ground on this. So,
Biking.
Yeah. So we're gonna, biking.
Yep. It's exciting. It sets us apart in so many ways. Good job. Nice job. Very articulate, too.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
We made it. We have all of the check marks on the agenda. Thanks, Stephanie. Looking forward to the May Looking forward to the May workshop. We'll have a lot more projects to talk with you all about for other recommendations. Again, we would be seeking approval for the program levels that we talked about today, as well as some of the capacity projects that we talked about. Again, all with the mind of putting together an approved STIP at the end of, or in August, and building lots of cool projects.
Tiffany, if I wanted to find out where this material is, where would I find it?
Yeah, if you go to our.
Yeah, I would, but not you.
I've been there before.
So if you go to our Utah Transportation Commission website, you will find everything you saw here today in this March programming workshop presentation. So all of the slides are there, and all the links are there. We'll have permission rights updated for you all to look at this information. Thank you, everybody.
So I think, Nagi, that concludes the workshop. I guess I'll extend the offer to any of the commissioners. As you think about this, if you have questions, if you want to propose something different, get with any of us. And our folks would love to sit down with you, if it's a region director or group leader, Ben or Lisa, and just have that conversation. So we're available at any time to talk through it. It's a lot of information, I know that, but that's why we want to put it out here now. let folks in the public get with you, give you input. But this is an open process, and we've done our best with recommendations, but things can always be better. So we look forward to working with you before any decisions are made. So, any last words, Nadia?
Thank you, UDOT. Thank you, everyone, department heads, deputies, and regional directors, everyone. Thank you for giving us this education. Without your help, we will not be able to find our way in decision-making process. Thank you. It's just great compliment to every one of you. And again, I travel throughout the states and throughout the different countries, and UDOT is the best in my book and their books, so thank you.
All right, let's call it a meeting and move on to other events. Thank you.